Okay, well, welcome everybody to the NHS Finance Career Sponsorship Conference, and Happy New Year to you all. It's rather strange talking and not seeing anybody, but I can see there's 72 people out there in our communities, as it were. I'll just go through a little bit of housekeeping before we kick into the session. So just in terms of introductions, I'm Jonathan Stevens, Regional Director of Finance for the Northwest of England, and I'll let Natasha introduce herself shortly. We are recording the session, and that will be shared after the session closes today. In terms of questions and answers, we will be allowing time for questions and answers as part of each session, but what we're going to do is use the Slido. So if you log on to www.slido.com and enter the code #sponsorship2021, you can fire your questions through that route. We'll be picking up the questions on your behalf and asking the questions on your behalf, so you can either anonymize them, or happy for you to put your names as well. Also, to remind everyone that you'll receive a CPD certificate once this session's been completed as well. I think that's, so saying before, it's not the usual, and here are the fire exits and there are the toilets, because you all know your own amenities and where to rush out if you have a problem. So okay, into the session really, and it's really great that we've got a good number joining today. The sponsorship program in particular is something I'm really passionate about and strongly promoting and pushing, not just in the Northwest but nationally. In the Northwest, we now have 27 sponsees, which is great. In terms of the sponsorship program, it's a 2-year program, but to be honest, you can have a relationship beyond the 2 years, but 2 years gives sort of a target really for supporting the sponsee in achieving sort of their next move for what they want their next step in their career to be. And it's aimed at finance staff who want to progress their career and have their own drive and ambition to progress their career, hopefully onwards to the most senior leadership positions in the finance community, because that's where we need to have better representation of our populations and our different staff groups. So the sponsorship program is specifically aimed at what we would call our underrepresented groups at leadership levels, and also other levels within our NHS finance functions. So that's women, BAME colleagues, disability, and LGBTQ+. And why is that important? Well, it's important we have a workforce that represents the diversity of the populations we serve. It's also important because diverse teams are high performing, and we want different perspectives of life about how we provide our services and how we provide our functions. And in terms of leadership, you only have to look across the Northwest actually, and I think out of all of our Northwest CFOs and directors of finance, we've got only 2 BAME representation at that senior leadership level. Clearly, if you were to look at the population of the Northwest, that's clearly not representative of the populations we serve. So this sponsorship program is aimed at supporting those underrepresented groups, and getting them to progress their careers and aspirations. It's a very active relationship, so the sponsee and the sponsor, and I'll talk about the sponsor in a minute, and then Natasha can talk about her position as a sponsee. So it's not like a mentorship arrangement where you might meet up with your mentor and have a discussion and then you sort of walk away and catch up in a few months' time. It's an active relationship where the sponsor can give advice, feedback, help talk you through your next steps and thinking in your career, open doors in terms of experience, in terms of shadowing, placements, also be a real strong advocate for you, so promoting you and making your sort of name known around the patch so you get exposure to different experiences. Also being in a position of influence. So the important aspect of this relationship is the sponsor is there to help you and help unblock things, can have influence, enables you, to get exposed to different experiences. And Natasha can talk briefly about some of the things she's done as we've had our relationship over the last 2 years as a sponsor and sponsee under this program. And also help the sponsees sort of shape their minds about what they would like to do as a next step, and also thinking a bit longer term about the career path that they would like to follow. And clearly, it's not get your next job and that's the end of it. The point here is that the sponsee is supported and gets to the ultimate ambition that they want. Hopefully, for some of you that to become sponsees, that's to become one of our senior leaders, because that's where we need better diversity and representation. But if not, if it's to become the best 8D you want to be, that's fantastic as well. So don't be put off by thinking about becoming a sponsor and thinking, my goodness, the director of finance seems a long way off, I won't join. This is about achieving your next step on your path to your career development. So this is open to any grade, so it's not grade specific. There's an expectation that you've had some time in the NHS, so at least show some understanding of the organisation you're working with and an idea about your next step in your future. So I think it's a really good programme, this. I'm really pleased that we've grown the number in the Northwest. There's also a similar sort of number in London. We're trying to spread this across the North and the rest of the country. It's also presented a good opportunity for creating networks. So, for example, in the Northwest, and there's a similar setup in the London patch, our sponsees now meet as a network, so a sponsees network, and they're meeting every month, which is really great. So that's sort of, they can talk to each other about development, create a sense of a group colleagues and to share experiences, etc. But also, I think, see the sponsees becoming a bit of a movement, really, and those individuals can help me in supporting my work in improving equality, diversity, inclusion across the Northwest and the North, actually. And on that point, I've actually got a North Equality, Diversity, Inclusion working group, and Natasha and Alice and other sponsees often feed back into that group the sorts of things that we need to do to move this agenda along in terms of practical stuff that we're doing. So, the more sponsees we have, you're getting direct support to, develop your career. You can form part of a network of individuals that enables you to have colleagues to touch base with, and also you can be in a position of influence to influence people like myself about sorts of policies and things that we're doing to improve EDI across the finance community, locally and nationally. What I've also got a view on as well is the more sponsees we have, and I've said this a few times, we could think about arranging secondment opportunities, because if we've got a sort of a cohort of individuals that are all wanting different experiences, there's an opportunity within our sponsees to do sort of swaps, so I'm just using these two names. So if Natasha wanted to do something that Alice was doing, and Alice would like to get experience in something that Natasha was doing, that's quite easy to facilitate where you're backed by a sponsor, and the sort of receiving organisation and the organisation that's losing gets an individual as well, and that could be a more structured approach to secondment, and I'm having discussions about how we might make that a more formal part of the actual sponsorship programme. So I think this holds a lot of opportunity, and I know from a number of the sponsees that that I've sponsored, I know colleagues have sponsored, have actually got through this support and their own drive and ambition, they have hopefully got on to their next step in their career path and got a promotion, which is good as well, and gain more confidence and exposure as part of this program. So I'm hoping it's going to be a really good day. I'm sure it will. We've got some good speakers and some good participants, and hopefully at the end of this we'll get even more interest from you as applicants to the sponsorship program. Because what I would like, for just take the Northwest, we've got sort of 70 organisations. It'd be great if we had a sponsee from each one of those going forward, as we progress into this year. So that's the sponsorship program, and that's a sort of view from a sponsor. I'll just hand over to Natasha Monroe, who is my sponsor, as it were, to just give a little preview as her experience and what's required of a sponsee. So over to you, Natasha.
Hi everyone, I'm Natasha Monroe, and like Jonathan says, I'm actually one of his sponsees on the program. And I joined the program 2 years ago, and I was at a point in time in my career when I started to think about what my next steps should be in terms of my career progression, what I would need to do, trying to identify some areas or skill gaps that I might have. And that's how I came across the sponsorship program on the FFF website. I contacted them and asked whether we had any sponsors within my own organisation, and I work for NHS England and NHS Improvement. I'm a financial planning manager in one of the central finance teams. I was then contacted a few weeks later to let me know that there was a potential sponsor, which was Jonathan, and whether we could set up a meeting for both of us to meet and see whether we wanted to go ahead and be sponsee and sponsor. Our meeting was set up virtually. I'm based in London, Jonathan's based in the Northwest. So our first meeting was actually a virtual meeting, which was, I think, added a bit of additional nerves on top of what I already had. So we had our meeting. In our first meeting, I introduced myself. Jonathan did the same. Both of us shared our career backgrounds. I shared why I thought potentially this program could be good for me. Jonathan also shared why he wanted to join the program as a sponsor. And quite early, I think in the first meeting, we then decided, and I know this is probably not the same for all sponsor relationships, but in the first meeting, we decided that we would go ahead and be sponsee and sponsor going forward. I mean, the first meeting we had we were quite direct and quite clear in what we thought of the program and in terms of where we thought we could go. But it has evolved since that first meeting that we had. We agreed that we would meet once a month, whether this was virtually or in person. We agreed that both Jonathan and myself would have actions that we would take from each meeting. And between our meetings, so we met every month, in between those we would keep in regular contact as well. So for example, if I had an action that needed to be completed by our following meeting, I would keep in contact with Jonathan via email or via text, just to let him know how far I was getting, and he would do the same. Some of the opportunities that I've had with the sponsorship program, like Jonathan's already mentioned, secondments and networking opportunities. Very early on, we had a discussion about where I was in terms of organization, whether I was thinking about progressing only within my own organization, or whether I was thinking more broadly, progressing within, for example, a trust or CCG or a different type of NHS organization. At that time, I was actually only thinking about progressing within my own organization. So that was a prompt from Jonathan to start thinking more broadly. And one way he actually did that was put me into contact with directors of finance and CFOs of trusts as well as CCGs to set up shadowing days. So Jonathan did the initial contact, and then I followed up, did sort of a pre-meet with the people I would meet. I spent shadowing days with both DOFs as well as CFOs for CCGs and trusts. So I spent the whole day with them, talk to them about their own careers and potentially what I should be thinking about in terms of my steps up. I also attended meetings with them. I was fortunate enough to attend some trust board meetings where I could see the interaction of board members. I could see the behaviours exhibited and take from that for when eventually I do get to that point, what I should and shouldn't do. So those are some of the opportunities I've had, and Jonathan's mentioned, thinking about potential secondments, so that the skills that I'm currently lacking or were currently lacking, what skills I could fill potentially by doing a secondment. Because I was doing interviews, and some of the feedback I was getting was, we can see that you're a very good candidate, but the person that was chosen just has further skills that they were looking for. So that's when we started talking about potentially doing some secondment so that I could do sort of fill the gaps that has been identified. Early on in the program as well, I think probably about 6 months into the program, I contacted the FFF team again to find out whether there were any other sponsees to the program, because it was a very new program. I asked whether there was any sponsees and whether it would be possible to be put into contact with any of the other sponsees. Thinking about potentially setting up a network so we could offer support to each other, learn from each other, identify areas that we might not individually have known about. So we set up a sponsee networking group. I think the first few months we probably had about 10. The network has significantly grown. I think we are roughly about 40 sponsees, and that covers all of England. Like Jonathan said, with a heavy representation in both London and Northwest. So the national sponsee networking group meets every 3 months, but we also now have regional sponsee networking groups who meet every month. Some of the regions are quite advanced. Some regions are actually struggling with recruiting some new sponsees. And the national sponsee network, we're actually contributing to the sponsorship program, where we have, from our own experiences, sponsors, we've contributed to the program in terms of developing some of the material that is now available to new sponsees. So we've contributed to a sponsorship workbook, where what we've done is we've noted down how sponsees can go about setting up finding a sponsor, potential sponsor, what you should be looking for, trying to find someone who is within your own sphere of influence, someone who could have a direct influence on your career. So we've contributed that. We've also contributed in terms of how you go about setting up your meetings, some of the actions you can take, how you should run your meetings. So a very good sponsorship workbook that the sponsees in the network has contributed to. And some of the work we're now looking at is actually developing a case study section on the FFF website, where some of the sponsors can actually contribute in terms of what they've gained from the sponsorship program, depending on how far they are. Also, what we're doing is looking at how we can potentially recruit some new sponsees. So what we found within the group is that we have a very heavy representation of 8As and above. So now we're starting to think about what do we need to do in terms of recruiting from lower banding. So that's a work stream that the network is looking at the moment. So it's a very active network, and I would say the sponsee and sponsor relationship itself is a very active, it's not passive. So there shouldn't be an expectation where the sponsee joins and expects the sponsor to put in all the work. It is sponsee and sponsor putting the work in order to make it successful. And by joining the program, we do feel that, you know, they are obviously the what is set in the pack is, you know, it is focused towards career progression, but sort of the additional benefits is, you know, gaining confidence where you might not necessarily have had the confidence to speak up when you were attending a board meeting. You may not have felt comfortable or confident enough to speak up, but with the help of your sponsor, you can actually see how to approach those situations. So there's an additional benefit with it in terms of myself personally, the confidence that I've gained in leading the sponsorship network and chairing the sponsorship network, speaking to CFOs and DOFs, having the confidence to do that. So that's very briefly what I've gained from the program, and also some of the experiences that other sponsees have gained from the program itself. So I'll pass over to Jonathan again.
Thank you, Natasha. That was excellent. I'd like to thank Natasha in particular, and I know Alice is on today's session as well, for the work they've really done to develop this program. Because as I said, when Natasha and I sort of joined right at the beginning, didn't we, Natasha, when this was launched? I think it was just a few pieces of paper about the sponsorship program, and it's really developed, and the material to support the program is really fantastic, really, and it's due to the hard work of Natasha and all of the the other sponsees that have contributed, which is good, because it's a bit like a 360 process. We're sort of reverse mentoring each other, aren't we, Natasha, in this, which is really helpful. And Natasha mentioned an important point there. It's important that you get the right sponsor as well, someone who can help influence. So they've got to be obviously in a more senior position to yourself and unlock things and give you the right advice, and sometimes picking the right sponsor that fits with the sort of career direction you're thinking about can be helpful as well. And the sponsors can be within your organisation, or they can be external. There's no sort of one size fits all. And Tasha and I have had worked really well together, haven't we? Even though we're sort of miles apart. And given the technology we're all sort of working on today, in some respects, the use of Teams and Zooms and whatever else technology you use makes it a lot more flexible, both from the relationship bit, but also actually an exposure to experience. So, in terms of experience as a part of this program, it's a lot easier to join meetings and shadow electronically now than try to arrange visits to places. But hopefully, at some point in the near future, we can get back to that face-to-face stuff as well. So hopefully that's a helpful initial introduction. So we'll go over now to sort of an interview with one of our sponsees, so the sponsee experience, followed by the sponsor experience. So could I welcome Claudia Iton? She's a former HR director of Unilever and a director of Replete Consulting, and Claudia's going to interview Alice Fogan, who's assistant director of finance at Northwest Boroughs NHS Foundation Trust in the Northwest, and Alice also helpfully chairs the sponsee network in the Northwest. So welcome to Claudia, and welcome to Alice.
Thank you, Jonathan. Hello, Alice. Lovely to see you again. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too, Claudia.
How have you been?
Good. This is actually my first day back at work since Christmas, so it's been, I've had a good break.
Very nice, good. And a nice choice to get back in on this note. So Alice, thank you for agreeing to talk with me this morning. We have a number of people on this call who I'm sure are really interested to understand what the sponsee experience is like. As it turns out, currently the program has 116 sponsors available for the relationships, but only 72 sponsees. So that suggests that there's scope for people to set up new relationships and to really take advantage of what is clearly an excellent program. So I'm really hoping that you can tell your story and inspire some people to get involved. So why don't you take us through a few things? Tell us what your role is, where you are currently in the organization, how long you've been with the NHS, and also how long you've been on the program.
So my current role is Assistant Director of Contracting and Transformation. I work for Northwest Boroughs Healthcare, which is a mental health and community trust based in the Northwest. I've been working for the NHS for just over about 11 years, but I've been in this particular role roughly about 2.5, 3 years now. So I think just thinking like I've been previously to Northwest Boroughs, I've been working for Wigan Borough CCG, which is a commissioning organisation. And this is my sort of first time in a provider organisation.
Right. And how long have you been on the sponsorship program itself?
So I've been on the sponsorship program since September 2019. Right. So about 1.5 years now, yeah.
You're coming on for 1.5 years.
Yeah.
I remember when we first met, you were talking to me about how apprehensive you were initially before you decided to get involved. talk to us a little bit about that, because I was really fascinated about what you said.
Yeah, so when I first heard about this program, how it was aimed at, obviously this was, like I said, back then it was aimed at those above 8A, female and BAME. And I did sort of think, well, obviously I'm female, I'm Chinese, you know, so I kind of fit the criterias. But at the same time, I felt a bit reserved about it because, you know, I've always been working hard and I've always been taught to work hard and you'll get there. And, you know, you want to prove that you can be treated as an equal to everyone else and treated the same as everyone else. But it did sort of feel a bit that this program was aimed at a specific target. So then it kind of contradicted how I was feeling about treated as equals, you know. So it was a bit sort of like confusing at first as to whether it was right or not. More look into the program about how it sort of felt like actually this is more of an opportunity rather than letting it block what I want to achieve.
Right. I think what you shared is really significant, because so many people from underrepresented groups struggle with what you've described. You want to be recognized on your merit. You want your performance to do the talking. And so there's this hesitation around, you know, why should I have to join this program? Why can't it just happen for me like it does for everyone else? And I think a lot of the time what people miss is that in large organizations, a lot of things happen through informal channels anyway. It isn't that everyone else has got where they got simply by doing the things that you think you ought to do. People have had an insight. Most hiring managers, when they advertise a role, for instance, they will want to inform themselves about who's likely to be placed into that role. So there are always discussions and conversations and networks that contribute to who gets into what role. So that hesitation that you have around, you know, should I be doing this? I think it's really great that you got past it, because all you've done is give yourself an opportunity that other people have had without necessarily having to join a group like this. And I think that's one of the fabulous things about this program, is that it creates that opportunity for people who otherwise aren't plugged in to the networks to get in. So great, thank you for sharing that, Alice. So talk to us then about, once you've made the decision, then what happened next? How did you, put your hand up and then get attached to a sponsor?
Yeah. Well, I actually heard about this program at the HFMA Northwest Conference in Blackpool. Right. And it was Jonathan Stephen was obviously talking about it. And the more he talked about it, the more I thought, that is definitely something that I need to look into, and that is something that I want to. So I asked, I actually got in contact with Jonathan directly and sort of explained to him that I was really interested in the program and wanted to know more. I sent him a brief background of like my experience so far and what my aims were. And then he put me in contact with my sponsor, who is John Graham, who's the CFO at Stockport. I'd never, to be honest with you, I'd never even heard of John before I started this program. But I suppose the thing is, I don't really know many of the director of finances and of senior leaders.
Exactly.
In the area, sort of thing, apart from the ones that I generally work with, or the ones that you have close contact with,
which would be in your organization.
Yeah, exactly.
But did you have a choice, Alice? I mean, great that you hit it off with John, but what was the process in terms of matching you with a sponsor that you wanted to work with, that you would find a connection with?
Yeah, I think because I was, to be honest with you, Claudia, I was probably either second or third person in the Northwest to be a sponsee. So it was early stages back then. So it was very much, here's a potential sponsor. Me and John met up for the first time to discuss what our what my aspirations were, what my career so far was, what I'd like to do. He talked about his experience, what he could potentially help me with, and then we agreed that we would carry on with the sponsoring. So I think now, you've got a choice of like you said, there's over 100 sponsors available, so there is a choice out there for people. And I think it's really important to find someone that you get along with, that you can talk openly and be honest with, because that's the only way the relationship would really work.
Going to really work and help, absolutely. So you found that connection, which is great. And did you set about agreeing how you would run the relationship then? Did you have the material that exists now in terms of guidance of how to set up a contract with your sponsor, between sponsor and sponsee? Or was that all, were you flying the plane while building the plane?
I think everything was definitely off the cuff at the time. Mm-hmm. So we did sort of agree that we'd roughly meet once a month, that we, obviously we'd come back with whatever actions that we'd agreed to take away and come back with it. We'd also agreed that, if needed, that we can contact each other at any point as well. It wasn't so that we had to wait for the next meeting.
Right.
So that's what we had agreed to start off with. I think as the relationship developed, as things came across, sometimes we would meet more often. Mm-hmm. And then other times, we might, like when COVID started back in March last year, obviously I'd been redeployed to manage PPE. So at that point, I didn't really have the time and the ability to focus on career development, because COVID had hit. So, I hadn't met John for at least a couple of months, so I guess it's a working thing where it depends on what your needs and requirements are at the time.
Yeah. It's going to flow based on the circumstances that we're all in. And Alice, talk to us a bit more about, clearly you had that connection with Jonathan, which is great, but how did the relationship develop? I mean, how challenging was he with you? I'm going to be talking to him later, so we hear his view. How challenging was he to you? And how did you find that? How did you find dealing with that? Did he challenge you?
Oh yeah, yes, he did. Well, I think he asked questions where it opened your mind up a bit more, and to think. I think, like Natasha had said earlier today, about thinking more broadly. Mm-hmm. So I was very much focused on getting the next level, getting to the next banding. Mm-hmm. And he actually said, well, actually, what if you were to stay in your current organization, what role would that be? And I said, well, a deputy director of finance role. That would be that is the next person above me. That's my line manager, Mm-hmm. And he said, well, why don't you apply for this job? And I said, because there was a job, and I said, well, I can't. It's a band 9. That's 2 grades above, I can't, that feels like too high. And he did sort of say, well, why not? And it does make you think, okay, really, why not? But I guess the thing is then we started looking at what skill sets do I need to become a deputy director of finance. What is it that I haven't got now, which I can start building on to become that deputy director of finance? So there was a lot of challenge in that way, and making me think about what things I could do, what else to look at. So he just sort of like did ask questions, but at the same time he also gave you
broadening your horizons. Clearly,
he did also give you some advice as well as to how to do it, or what things, so we discussed. So for example, with my line manager, she had identified some areas of skills gaps and experience gap, and I discussed it with John as to whether he felt that was needed or not as well, you know, to get that sort of second opinion. And there were a couple of things that we did both, you know, that we agreed on, and so therefore that's the areas I'm working on. But there was some other areas where he said, well, actually, you don't really need all the experience in every area of finance before you can move up. So there was there was that sort of advice as well.
Reassurance as well as advice and challenge, which is great. And you mentioned there about your line manager's perspective, and how you were able to have conversations with both your line manager and your sponsor. Talk a bit about that. Were there conflicts in managing that with those two relationships in parallel? How have you come to it?
There was definitely conflict, especially at the start, because my line manager didn't really understand why there was a need for the sponsorship program. She didn't really understand the fact that, you know, her sort of words were that, Alice, you're already the FSD lead, you're already doing a lot of networking, we give you all the exposure that we can, what else do you actually need, you know?
Why are you doing this?
Yeah, why are you doing it? So it was a bit like, well, there might be things that I need that you can't give me, you know.
There's
so
a world
one
beyond
of the
this.
And
would
so
you
like,
say her position has changed since then?
oh yes,
Right. How
I think she's seen the benefit.
Bring that about?
I explained more about the program, and obviously, you know, through my one-to-ones, I keep her up to date as to what I'm doing from the program,
right,
and where I am up to with things. But then I guess it's linking in with my personal development, you know, for my PDR as well. So that it's not just what I get from my organization, but it's also what I can get from the sponsorship program with John.
So she's seeing it as adding value now, not as something that's distracting you.
No. And also, I've also suggested that she might actually want to have a look at the program for herself as well. So
very helpful. Alice, have you had a mentor in the past or currently?
I've had a coach in the past.
Right. And how would you compare that experience or what you got from the coach as opposed to what you get from your sponsor?
The coach that I had was not finance background, not from the NHS. So it was very much about working on my interpersonal skills, how to manage certain circumstances. And it was also about, it was more them getting you to think about what you should do and how you should do it and reflect on things. Whereas I think with the sponsorship program, you know, John is so active, you know, like, for example, I said I was interested in a particular role that'd been advertised, and he'd said, you know, oh, I know that person, I'll go and speak to him to see, you know, find out more about it for you. And I'm like, whoa, you're actually doing that for me, you know? So it was really nice. And, you know, and you kind of at the same time never expect people to do all of that, you know, even though you've done some homework yourself and you've looked into it. It's just that, I suppose, like that added help. You know, he's got the networks that I wouldn't have, and obviously my coach wouldn't have.
Your coach wouldn't have either. I think what you've described is brilliant in explaining the difference, the edge that a sponsor brings, and also remembering that this is something that other people who've progressed in the organization have always enjoyed, and it's great that you now have the opportunity to do that. But Alice, looking forward, I mean, when you're nearly a year and a half into the program, it typically runs over 2 years. What's your ambition? What's your goal for the remaining months as you have this formal relationship with your sponsor? What are you aiming for?
Well, obviously, I'm going to carry on working with John and develop the skill set that I need. But there are some areas that I'm probably looking at improving on or getting some shadowing experience. One of the things I did want to highlight was that because I'd as part of the national network, I heard about Natasha and Aisha doing some shadow days. So I'd spoken to John about it in one of our meetings, and then he said, well, actually, I'm chairing the HFMA round table, why don't you come along to shadow? And that's an opportunity that I don't think anyone would normally get to do. You know, so not only did I get to shadow as such on the round table, whilst I was on the call, I actually got an opportunity to talk and participate. So something that started off as a shadowing became an actual participation. So that was really, you know,
platform to show.
Yeah, and it was really good experience. Yeah.
Brilliant.
So so I want to do more of that as well, but also, you know, the confidence, the experience that, you know, that John has sort of guided me with and provided me with, it's helped me to develop myself.
That's the word I wanted to come to. Yeah. All that you described suggests that you must be gaining a lot of confidence from this interaction. I mean, to be able to step up and actually speak and contribute to that session as you were participating in shadow mode. How has this confidence impacted your day-to-day? What if you step back and observe yourself, do you think it's made a difference to the way you carry on in your day-to-day?
Yeah, I think so. It's given me the confidence to actually, so I now chair the Northwest Sponsee Network. You know, I've been more confident in that, being more confident about speaking to people, and yeah, it's just also made me think about how I present myself amongst my team as well. Right. And how I could support my team differently as well. Even though some of my team members aren't on the sponsorship program, you know, there's still ways of me being able to help them from what I've learned from the program.
With the principles that you've learned and taken up. Yeah, no, that's clear. No, well done you. What I'd like to do now is invite people who are on the call to share, to give us their questions and see if you can answer them, Alice. Are there any that we have yet?
Grace, are you picking up the questions?
Yeah, I'm just coming through to the panelist, and then she can relay the questions that have come through.
Okay, thank you. That was great, by the way, Claudia and Alice, thank you.
Hi all, can you hear me? Sorry, I think it just takes a couple of seconds to bring me back onto the screen. We have had quite a few questions come through, and I'll start with the one that's actually directed at you, Alice, and that's just a simple question about what is the most beneficial element of the programme so far for you?
There's actually quite a lot. It's really hard to describe about what's the most beneficial. I mean, John has helped me a great deal. He's even helped me at you know, reviewing the application forms for jobs that I've had, you know, and he's also, you know, spent time reviewing the presentations that I've prepared for any interviews. He's put me in contact with certain people, which has actually led to me starting a secondment next month. So yeah, he's open. I feel like he's opened some doors for me, really, and definitely opened my eyes as well.
Excellent, thank you. And there are some more general questions just around sponsorship, which I'll open up to all of you guys on screen at the moment. Going from the top, I think we touched on the Northwest having quite a strong network of both sponsors and sponsees. However, we do have a question about there is a real lack of mentors, especially at director and sub-director levels across the country. Do you think we might have a similar problem with sponsors? Jonathan, I might point this one to you if that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of sponsors, as you get, so I'm encouraging directors of finance and CFOs to step forward. And to be fair, they are doing what given that the sponsorship programs now widened out to be all grades, we do need sponsors at other levels as well. And interestingly, we had a couple of sessions recently, which was about a check and challenge about what we're doing generally on EDI from staff. Which was good. And one of the things they mentioned to us about how do we also get, and I'll call it middle management, a bit more aware of these programs and involved, rather than it just being directors of finance and CFOs. I mean, Alice gave a classic example there, didn't she, where, you know, when she first was talking through her line manager didn't really know why this was needed and why it was necessary, sort of thing. But obviously that's become more improved. So I think we do need to widen out a number of sponsors at different levels within the grade structure. Because, you know, it might be better, you know, Alice potentially could be a sponsor from a lower graded member of staff that wants to join the sponsorship scheme. So yeah, that's something we do need to think about, and think about how we sort of promote a bit more below that sort of level, the sponsorship program and what it's trying to achieve. So there's a bit about sponsees, which we clearly need to grow and is growing, which is fantastic. But there's something about how we now broaden the sponsor portfolio really, and sponsor support. So yeah, I agree with that.
Thanks, Jonathan. There is another question around the sort of time expectations of the role. So Alice, how much of your time does this take for your meetings with John, etc.? Would you say, I guess in like a month's time, how much time would you have to give to this?
Our meetings normally last about an hour, and like I said, on average we have our meetings once a month, but again it depends on what you feel is needed as to how long you take. At the end of the day, what efforts you put in is what you're going to get out as well. So, you know, when I was going through the job application point to time, interviews, John was available to me almost every day. You know, he made time for that. And I think when I was doing my application, we'd gone through the application, then it was like, okay, what questions am I going to prepare myself for interviews, you know, and they were like half an hour here or there. But again, it depends on where you are in that process as well, and what you're doing. But generally 1 hour a month is probably about right.
Excellent, thank you. We have had a couple more questions as well around clarity around the difference between sponsorship and mentoring. So Claudia, would you be able to elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, I'm happy to, Grace. The traditional difference is that a mentor has a relationship with the mentee, which is about improving their performance. But the mentor has no agency per se within the organization in terms of advancing the career of the mentee. So they can work together. There's a type of a coaching relationship. Sometimes the mentor will have functional expertise in place. What Alice describes as a coach who was not a finance professional, but who was working with her on other aspects of her presence and her delivery as a manager. Most often mentors do have functional expertise, but it's around helping that individual to increase and improve their performance, but not about landing them in the organization further. That's the crucial difference between the mentor and the sponsor. Where the sponsor goes, as Alice has been so brilliantly sharing with us, is to open doors, and I love the way she put it, open doors and open minds. So while a mentor may in fact help open minds, what they're not placed to do is open doors. So it's that influence and ability and agency throughout the organization that a sponsor has. That's the key difference between them and a mentor. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. That's really helpful. We do have additional guidance also on the Future Focus Finance website, which details all of the information that you guys have just talked through in a sort of information pack. Also on the website, we do have contact details of of the Future Focus Finance email address. So if you are interested in signing up, just drop us a line and then we can help to either identify a sponsor that works in your organisation or in your locality, or work with you to find a sponsor. I think Jonathan and Natasha mentioned previously we are still building the networks across the regions, and there are there's more sponsors in some regions than others, but we are working together to improve this. So if this is of interest, please do get in touch and we will make sure we match you with someone.
And on the matching point, I mean, because I generally know the people who are sponsors and I sort of get an understanding of what the sponsee's wanting, I can usually pick people that I think will sort of gel together. Ultimately, it's a test whether they do, but it's generally worked out so far.
Matchmaker.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
I was just going to add, Grace, I'm not sure if you've picked this up. I've seen a question that's come through, which was around resourcing. So the question is, does my trust have to pay for this sponsorship? And if I was on the sponsorship and then left my trust, would it have to be repaid? So you can just, Jonathan's shaking his head.
No, there's no cost to anything. It's basically a relationship that, accesses resources that are there in our systems at the moment, really. So yeah, there's nothing to pay.
Brilliant aspect of it, isn't it? It isn't like a traditional training course. Yeah.
We've had a couple of questions. We've seen questions on a few of the different platforms around what level this is aimed at. So the programme was initially set for bands 8B and above, but now it's open to all bands. So regardless of what band you work in, you can apply for this. It is just suggested or recommended that you have worked within the NHS for around 2 to 3 years, and that you're sort of ready for a promotion within the next 2 years. That's why it's kind of classed as a 2-year program, but anyone can join it, and again, as being a sponsor, you can also join at any level. You just need to have influence over your sponsee's career in some capacity. Okay, so we've got maybe time for a couple more questions, and I saw one on Slido, which was around potentially being blocked by a line manager for sponsorship, and how to overcome this.
Well, personally, if I found about that, I would intervene, because that would be totally inappropriate. You do not need your line manager's authorization to join the sponsorship program. So I'd say that right now. And I would be very disappointed if anyone was sort of blocked in that way, and we would pick that up in the appropriate way. So don't see that. I mean, what we need to do is promote this more so line managers understand what this is about, but you do not need permission from your line manager to apply to the sponsorship program. Clearly, having their support as part of your PDR, if I was a manager, I'd be thinking this was fantastic, and why would I go against it? So it would be very odd to me that anyone that was doing a line manager's job properly would say, no, you can't do that. But they have no veto over that. This is a program you pick up as an individual and join in that way. And I can imagine some folk maybe get a bit confused about what this is and where their role is in with that, but that's about how we educate and support. So that should not be a barrier to anybody at all.
Can I build on that, Jonathan?
Yeah, sure.
Just to add, brilliant, again, another wonderful feature of this, that the initiative actually lies with the sponsee. You can put your hand up and get involved and run with this. But here's the but. For a happy life, you don't want your line manager, in the corner where he or she is questioning, why do you need this, and perceiving the program as some sort of a threat. Yeah. Ideally, better communication, as Alice has found. Once her line manager was more informed about what it was about, it was all fine. So I think the more of that we can do, it would help, because as I say, brilliant that the agency lies with the individual. They can take the initiative and start the whole process off. But for a happy life, you don't want to be having to, you know, to be ducking and weaving with the line manager.
No, you're absolutely right, Claudia. And the important thing, this is about you. It's not about necessarily your organisation. It's about you and you succeeding and getting support and development. So, but you're right. It's important that you're not battling against your manager, because that just makes life difficult. But we need to just promote that more, so that's, you know, it's never crosses anyone's mind why that shouldn't be the case.
Thanks, everyone. Shall we move into the next session, and then any questions that haven't been picked up in this one, I'll try and pick them up in the next round.
Hey, Grace, it says we've got a 10-minute break. Is that right?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Apologies.
Is that
yes.
where we go to our virtual buffet of biscuits and tea and coffee?
All available in your own kitchens.
So we'll be back at 10:35, and just thank you again, Claudia, and thank you, Alice, for stepping up and partaking in the interview. It was really good. Thank you.
Brilliant.
See you in 10 minutes.
5.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. And we're now moving to Claudia's interview with John Graham. John Graham's Director of Finance at Stockport Foundation Trust, and John's Alice's sponsor. So over to Claudia and John. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan, for that. And good morning, John. Nice to see you again.
Hi, Claudia. Good to see you again.
So I'm sure you enjoyed that discussion, that conversation with Alice. It set you in a really good light. You're probably going to have a lot of people beating a path to your door now, looking for
Yeah, I think Alice was very kind indeed. So thank you, Alice.
No, but in fairness, we have a lot of people on the call, and hopefully many of them are curious about, you know, joining the program, either as a sponsee or as a sponsor. Can you share with us what your process was like in making the decision to become a sponsor? So when did you first become aware of the program, and how did you take the decision to get involved?
Yeah, sure. So I think, as Alice said, Alice was one of the first on the program, and I think in terms of my decision making, I think it was a Northwest Finance Directors meeting where Jonathan was talking, and Jonathan was talking about the sponsorship program, and he was asking colleagues in the room to support this and to get involved. And I think I actually managed to get hold of Jonathan at the end of the meeting and said, look, I'd be really, really interested in this. I subsequently followed up with an email to Jonathan. And I think for me, there's a wider context in that, you know, if I reflect and look back on my career, I know that people have helped me, and I've been fortunate that, you know, I've had support, and that has guided me. You know, I think there was a bit of a discussion before about, you know, coaching, mentoring, and sponsorship, and I've done that myself. Mm-hmm. And I think again, there's a bit about, you know, you do reach a certain level, and I genuinely think most directors of finance, you know, are very, very supportive of this, and they do want to try and help colleagues promote themselves and, you know, and progress their career. And that was my mindset very much. I wanted to be part of this. In a previous organization, we'd done a lot of work as an organization around coaching. You know, we'd invested in organizational coaching and got involved with national figures. But we'd also, as a group of directors, done a formal coaching qualification, a postgraduate qualification, which I did. So very, very much, you know, I wanted to be part of this. So, you know, I made contact with Jonathan.
Yeah, definitely something that you'd been interested before. Now, great points that you make there, John, and it's reflected, the interest that you describe is reflected in the fact that we have more sponsors than sponsees at the moment. And I'm also pleased to hear you acknowledge the point that as someone who is senior in your career, you have had support and encouragement in the past. Because as we were discussing with Alice, this can be a sticking point for some people before they put their hand up and think about getting involved. Because there is that conviction around, you know, my work should speak for me, you know, my performance should be all I need to put out there, and, you know, and all the rest should happen. But the reality is, and as you are stating, is that all careers benefit from networks and conversations, and none of them are entirely at arm's length. That's not the way the world works.
Absolutely, and I do think we are in quite a privileged position from the NHS. Obviously, we've got, you know, future focused finance, we've got HFMA, we've got FSD, and you know, one of the things I always say to folk is, look, get involved in those, you know. And I think Alice said before, there's a bit about how much you put in and, you know, what you get back. And I will make a bit of a plug around the Northwest, and you know, Jonathan and I have known each other for a long time, you know, and both, you know, prior to being in senior finance roles, but, you know, when we've been progressing our career. And again, I think we've both benefited from, you know, what the Northwest has done. And I know other regions are, you know, are doing something very similar. But I think it's having that sense of purpose and you know, that support from, you know, where Jonathan is at the moment in his role. You know, you can see he's passionate about it, but I think that's got to be an absolute must for whoever's in those roles. They've got to support people through. And again, I think one of the things that was mentioned before is about extending this program and making it more, you know, wider and not having a you know, just above a certain band. And I think that's absolutely crucial and important to us, about identifying those folk very early on and supporting them, and, you know, and providing that sort of guidance and clarity to them.
Absolutely, and bringing them on board so that they can be supportive,
Yeah.
As a precursor to participating themselves.
Yeah.
No, absolutely hear you. So back to your story and your journey working with Alice and in this program. Talk us through the matchmaking. Alice described what it was like for her, but how would you imagine, for an instant, this is clearly not what happened. Imagine if you were encountering a sponsee that you felt, this is not quite right. I don't think I'm going to give this person what they're looking for. How would you approach that? Because I think this might speak to some of the apprehension that a sponsee might have before stepping forward.
Yeah. Again, I think as Alice said, you know, we were probably at the start of it, and I was quite interested to hear Jonathan's comments about his matchmaking role. I'll speak to him privately about that later. But I think that is important that, you know, someone initially, particularly where we were at the first part of the program, that, you know, Jonathan put us in touch. I think, you know, relevant details like CVs and whatever were shared. So we arranged the initial conversation, and I guess for me, there was a bit about having that introductory chat, and as Alice said, there was a bit about, you know, I asked Alice to give me a bit of detail about her, both professionally and personally, because I think that's important. You know, I did the same. I talked about, you know, what I'd done and where I'd got to, but I sort of also articulated what I thought were sort of, you know, some ground rules to start off with. You know, so I talked about the fact this has to be two-way. And actually, you know, at the end of the day, Alice said, look, I don't gel with you for whatever reason. That's absolutely fine. I tried to give her the assurance and reassurance that that wouldn't have an impact on her, because I think, again, you picked up on the bit about how, you know, Alice has flourished and grown and confidence and whatever. It's actually a big step for someone to turn around to a director of finance and say, for whatever reason, I don't think this is going to work, and I'd like to go and get another person. And again, it's about trying to build that trust and that relationship, and get that confidence in. And I think where we ended the first meeting was I actually asked Alice to go away and do a few things, and one of them was to have a conversation. Have a you know, some reflection time with her, whereby, you know, she thought about me and what I'd said to her. And albeit it was only an hour and a half, I think, our first conversation, but actually have that conversation about whether she thought we could work together. And I tried to really reassure her that if she turned around and said, look, John, you know, for whatever reason, I'd like to do it with somebody else, you know, I tried to give her that assurance that would be completely fine. Right. Because certainly, as you know, with coaching relationships, Claudia, that's really important. You know, there naturally comes a point when the relationship, you know, in the sponsorship role or the mentor role or coach, actually you might say for both parties, okay, you know, we'll call it. That doesn't mean that, you know, the relationship stops as such, but just in that role. And I think it was just trying to give Alice that reflection and that honesty and openness to say, look,
the space and giving her permission almost to not to be apprehensive. If this isn't going to work for you, let's be honest with each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you were anticipating anything, and happily it all went brilliantly. But I want to pick up on something you mentioned about this had to be a two-way street. Now, I think many people would look at a sponsor-sponsee relationship and think that the sponsor's doing the giving and the sponsee's doing the receiving and the getting. Tell us a bit about what you have derived from this relationship as you've struck it up and it's developed.
Yeah. I mean, for me, very, very much so. You know, this has to be of a benefit to Alice, but also myself. You know, for me, it's an opportunity for me to have a different perspective. It's an opportunity for me to reflect. It's an opportunity for me to hear from Alice, you know, some of those challenges and those real issues that she's dealing with. I think there's also a bit about being aware of yourself and you know, I don't like this in some way, but the seniority of the position you have and how people, you know, might not have that confidence to come and talk to you and, right, you know, have an honest conversation with you. And I think you do have to have that reflection, don't you, that says, you know, it is difficult sometimes for someone to come and as Alice says, you know, approach someone they didn't really know, you know, there's always a judgment. Can I trust this person? Can I have a relationship with this person? And I think that for me was, you know, part of how do I go about it? How do I approach it? You know, what stance do I take? Again, you know, I picked up that, you know, Alice said, you know, I think there was a question from yourself or somebody else about, you know, what was I challenging? And yes, you are. But it's how you do that, and it's when you do that, and it's how you build the relationship to get to that point where you can put some of that challenge back in. So for me, you know, it's been a really positive experience. I've reflected on how I do things. I've reflected on what I've said to Alice, how I say to Alice. And again, I think you've got to approach it from that, you know, from that, both sides, and in terms of, and I think particularly being conscious of the weight of the advice sometimes that you can give someone, and actually it shouldn't come down to do this. It should be, you know, look, what have you thought about this, and you know, how are you considering things, and you know, what do you really want from things. And
that's your coaching training coming through, John.
Thank you.
No, that's brilliant, and I think it's great that what you described there, because this relationship has given you an access to someone at a junior level in the organization, giving you their perspectives, and in a way helping you become a better leader, because it's broadening your perspective and enabling you to communicate and interact at a level that you know, without the difficulty, if you like, of your seniority getting in the way, because you've established a relationship where you can talk. Have I summed that up?
No. I think that's absolutely spot on, Claudia. I used to work with someone who used to say, feedback is a gift. It's whether you choose to accept that gift, and also it's whether you choose to recognize the feedback. And I think that's really, really important, isn't it? You know, so someone like Alice, who, you know, can give you that completely different perspective. It's not someone who's in your team, because the dynamics around somebody in your team is different to someone who, you know, is outside the organization. You've got someone who, you know, Alice is going, as Alice I think articulated before, you know, her organization is going through organizational change. We obviously had the challenges around COVID. She was also thinking about her career and, you know, next steps. And there's a bit about, you know, trying to support Alice in terms of how does she achieve that. And, you know, some of the conversations we had were actually, it's not necessarily a detrimental step to move sideways, to move up. And you know, again, it's that overall rounded experience.
Which is brilliant, that she can have this and in a trusted relationship, which is what you've developed, where she can listen to what you're counseling and really take it on board. Could I suggest as well that one of the benefits for you as a sponsor would also be seeing your sponsee thrive, and actually as and when she makes progress, that must be a source of gratification for you as well.
It's absolutely fantastic, and I think, again, you know, I believe that most directors of finance are like this. You know, I know there's colleagues I've worked with and worked for me, and you know, hopefully, yes, we can promote and provide opportunities internally, but actually the NHS is a massive employer, so sometimes, you know,
one of the largest in the world.
Absolutely. And I think that bit about seeing people move on and, you know, get into senior positions, I actually get, you know, in terms of a personal view about that, it's one of the things that gives me most pleasure, if I'm being honest with you, you know, seeing someone actually move on, fulfill their potential, and get to a place where sometimes maybe they've been doubting themselves or being worried about whether they'd ever get there. And if we, us, whoever can play a small part in helping that, I think that's part of our role as an FD anyway, you know, and part of our role as the wider, you know, NHS community. Not
just in your direct role, but as leaders of this massive and wonderful organization. Now, John, thank you for that. I think you have gone a long way now to setting aside any apprehension people who are potential sponsees might have had, when they can consider, as you've really generously shared with us this morning, what's in it for me from the sponsor's point of view, so that there's less threat and less apprehension in terms of them making the approach. And we're all looking forward to having a flood of applications following today's event. But I think we're now at the stage where we want to open it up to questions from the room. So can I ask Grace to support us with that?
Yes, thanks, Claudia. So we have had a few more questions come in, and some are also quite general just to the sponsorship programme overall. So if we bring back everyone who spoke so far, and I will distribute the questions out. There was a question actually to Alice, and it probably relates to Natasha as well from the previous session, and it was around how does your organisation support you on the programme alongside your day job and your work-life balance? Alice, I'll start with you, and then Natasha, if you want to chip in as well, then please do.
Thanks, Grace. I think I actually missed the first few seconds of your question because it was moving me from
oh, sorry.
But I think it's to do with the organisational support. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like I said before, obviously my line manager gives me that support directly. We've both signed in a way. She's agreed that I'd be part of this program. I do meet John, like I said, roughly about once a month. This could be before the start of the working day, or it could be part way through. Just depends on what fits in. Obviously, as you can imagine, John's would be a very busy diary, so it's usually when it fits in. But yeah, my trust actually, obviously my FD supports me in this program as well, and my line manager as well, and it's something that we are promoting within our organisation, and we've had a further 2 of our finance team that's joined the sponsorship program as well.
Lovely, thanks, Alice. Natasha, did you want to share anything about the support you've received?
Yes, so the same as with Alice, I do have the support of my line manager, and the program actually feeds into my PDP that I have, the discussions that I have with her. In terms of the I suppose wider support from my line manager as well, there are times when, with the shadowing, this was pre-COVID obviously, so with the shadowing and attending certain meetings, when I've had to have discussions with her in terms of actually taking some time away from work. So she's been really supportive and very understanding with, where I've had to actually leave to attend meetings. And sometimes it could be for a full day. So that's the type of support I've had from my line manager as well. We also, within my organization, we do have a few other sponsees as well. So it is a program that is known within my organization, and the sponsors we have are senior people within the organization. So we do have some support from senior leaders and the overall organization as well.
Brilliant, thank you. So there is a question that's on Slido from David Vittori, and that's around, is there any mechanism for measuring the success or the failure of the sponsorship program yet? So Jonathan, can I bring you in to answer that one, please?
It's a good question. We've been talking about that recently. We haven't sort of set any hard metrics, partly because it's just over, probably just hitting the 2-year period. But now is probably a time of sort of a bit of a stock take and self-reflection on how the sponsees feel of the progress. I mean, not everyone will necessarily have changed the job, but listening to Natasha and Alice, thought they've had lots of benefits, even though they may be still in the same role, sort of thing. But we do need to measure some hard metrics as well, as about who has moved from where they are now to their next job, and is it helping unblock, support and development, that career progression. So it's a good point. I think now we've hit this sort of 2-year period. Now we've got more sponsees as well, where with a relatively small pool, we probably do need to start to set some, benefit assessments and some metrics of success, so that, if we're not hitting some of those, we need to reflect on what we need to tweak or develop the program. So I think that's an action for us to take away. Now, obviously, John and I know how our sponsees are progressing, and we and the sponsees feel that it's been good for them. I know from other sponsees in the sessions we've had, they've talked you know, very good about that with the program, but we do need some sort of hard measures that we can use as well in the promotion of this program.
Great, thank you. There's a question around the sponsor. So John, this might be one for you, and it's around, does a sponsor, can a sponsor have more than one sponsee, and what kind of work is undertaken outside of the meetings from your perspective?
Is that me or Jonathan? Sorry,
John Graham, yeah, to you.
I guess from my perspective, you know, at the moment I've just got Alice at the on this program. I do coach one or two other folk, you know, because of that was an ongoing thing. I mean, personally, yeah, I'd be happy to support somebody else. Some of this will be around, you know, time commitments and etc. I think you asked about, you know, how you know, the timings and how do you do stuff, and I think Alice, you know, has said about some we had regular meetings set up, but then obviously Alice was thinking about various positions. So for me, it's about being able to respond to that and respond to that in a timely way. So I think, to be fair, you know, I suggested to Alice one time, look, let's do there was a time presentation, I think, as part of her interview. So I said, look, let's do a dry run, and I think we did that on a Sunday afternoon or whenever it was, Alice, you know, and things like that. And again, I'm not saying that all sponsors have to do that. It's about, you know, what do you want to put in. So I think for me, it's about having that balance between, obviously, you know, most of us will have the busy day job, but it also reinforces our personal commitment to support folk. And again, it's about, you know, Alice made the point before, you have to put stuff in to get stuff out. So for me, I'm more than content to put things in, because I see the benefit back. And yeah, personally, I'd be more than happy to support another sponsee.
Yeah, and just on that point, I do have two actually. I mean, ultimately, this is, you know, part of our job as a senior leaders is to grow our staff and support them, because that ultimately creates our teams and future employment. So I don't see this really as an added thing. I see this as part of my responsibility and part of my role. And as John said, I get a lot of pleasure out of doing this sort of thing.
Lovely, thank you. There's also a question around sort of other schemes within the NHS, such as the Grad scheme, where graduates from that would then be moved into managerial positions, and it's not always very diverse. So how do you guys see this programme helping to sort of overcome this and make the sort of talent pool, as it was, more diverse? Jonathan, can I bring you back in, Jonathan Stevens?
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is one of the core aims of this, is about widening our talent pool and making it diverse. I often say about the sponsorship programme, it isn't really aimed at the very extrovert go-getter who generally pushes ahead and succeeds. I'm very keen on those people who feel a bit uncertain, a bit, you know, less more introvert and less confident at going forward, and bringing them out themselves. There's lots of talent in our workforce, and people, and partly because they look up to our leadership and don't see folk like themselves, are not necessarily encouraged to progress. So it's a bit like you were talking before, Claude. It's about, you know, exposing people to the opportunity, increasing their confidence. And it's amazing then how people grow. If I look back on my career, I wasn't confident when I, you know, left sixth form and went straight into a job, and it's getting that support and encouragement that brings you out of yourself. So for me, it's, you know, it's looking at across our workforce, and not just those that appear on graduate schemes that are generally backed and have got a lot of confidence and are driving forward. It's a lot of our other part of our workforce where we've got, you know, huge talent that just needs encouragement and support. So, you know, this is absolutely about widening that talent pool.
Grace, can I just support what John said, because, you know, you made a statement before about this is absolutely got to be part of the day job for finance directors and CFOs and senior finance staff, and it's just to reiterate that, you know, we've got an obligation and a duty to understand, you know, people who work for us and, you know, people who work in other organisations, and what we can do to support and maximise them. And as Jonathan says, you know, we've all had that support. And it is about, you know, perhaps those folk who've got, well, various elements of self-doubt, or maybe don't know how to tap in and access people. And, you know, generally speaking, you know, we are approachable, you know, we do want to do that. And I think some of that's about us breaking those barriers down and, you know, presenting that human face and saying, actually, we are interested in you as an individual. We're absolutely interested in you as an individual. And as Jonathan says, you know, seeing people progress is fantastic. And, you know, and that is a massive achievement for the individual, but it's also a small part that we played in doing that.
Yeah. Can I just add, if I may, it is so gratifying to hear the exchange you've just had and what both John and Jonathan have had to say. That point about recognizing that talent exists not always in the traditional mold is so important. I think it's one of the opportunities of our time that's come around recently. And I couldn't encourage people on this call more to strike while the iron is hot. You're in an organization that's recognizing and you know that your potential is out there, and they're extending their arms to embrace you and help you get on your way. Go for it. What have you got to lose?
Absolutely. And just on that, we have had a few more questions just around the logistics and how to get involved again. So just to reiterate, if you guys are interested in signing up, please do just drop the Future Focused Finance email a note and one of us will get back to you ASAP. What we'll do is share a list of sponsors either in your organisation or within your SDP ICS patch that would be available, and we work with you to choose that person. It's not exactly chosen for you. Obviously, some regions where we've got more sponsors, you'll have more people to pick from, but we will work with you to find the best match for you. So please do get in touch, even if it's just to ask more questions. Just drop us an email at any time. And if there's any questions that we haven't picked up on this, we'll run through at the end and we'll try and answer them when we send out a follow-up email to cover everything. So we've got a couple of minutes until the next session. I'll just quickly sift through the questions again in case we've missed anything. Did any of you in the meantime want to sort of close on anything from the conversations we've had with both Alice and John around the different roles within the relationship?
Can I just say a big thank you to John as well for popping up to do the interview. It was brilliant. And again, thank you to Alice. I think you've really brought out from both sides the benefits of this program and hopefully sent a positive message out to those people on the conference today that it's really something to consider and a really positive thing that we're trying to promote and expand upon. I don't know if John or Alice or Grace, Natasha or Claudia have got any final points you would like to close on.
Yeah, no. Thank you, Jonathan. And I think as well, you know, there's an acknowledgement that you know, in your role and your other colleagues across the country, you know, are very, very important in sponsoring this. And I guess what I would say to people on the call and, you know, the conference is, look, you've made the first step in terms of logging on and, you know, listening to what we say. Just take the next step, sign up, you know, and that there are genuinely that FD colleagues, you know, are waiting to support you and help you, and we generally want to do it. So, you know, it's not, you've done the biggest step. You've logged on to this. Just finish it off and get your name down. Contact Grace and the team, and get involved in the program.
Thanks, John.
And can I just say for anyone who is interested in the program in becoming a sponsee, the current sponsees are very happy to have an initial conversation with you. And I mean, both Alice and myself and some of the other sponsees, we've had people contacting us to talk about our experiences of the program. So you can do that. Please do contact the FFF team if you want to have a discussion with the sponsee first before deciding to join.
Thanks, Natasha. That's really helped. It gives you a sort of from the horse's mouth, as it were, experience, you know, offline, which I think is helpful. Thank you, Natasha. Can
I just add my thanks to Alice and John for the brilliant expose they gave this morning in terms of what their experience has been like, and I found it a really inspiring one from both perspectives. And in addition, Jonathan, just to notice and to learn of your passion and commitment to this whole program, that's been really inspiring as well. I'm searching for the words here, but I can't help coming back to the conclusion that this is really a golden opportunity for people, and all that's required is for them to, as John has asked them to, just take the next step.
Yeah, thank you, Claudia, and thank you to you as well. You've really nice interview style, which I think has brought out the comments that have been really helpful to everybody. So thank you to you as well.
You're very welcome. My pleasure.
Okay, I think we're on to the next bit now, aren't we, Grace? So we've got some career stories now, which will be very interesting about people's experiences as they've grown in their jobs. So I think it's in the order on the list. So I think we've got Maria Wheeler, who's Chief Finance Officer at NHS Thurrock CCG, to go first, I think, and then followed by Hannah Hamilton, who's the Regional Director of Finance of South East for NHS England and NHS in Improvement. So could I welcome Maria, please, as the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Yeah, can you hear me? That's probably the first.
Hear you, but can't see you.
Can't see me, so what do I have to do then? Oh, that's it.
There's a little button that says got the video. Thank you.
Is that better?
That's
Oh,
great. Thank you, Maria. I'll just mute myself and turn my video off. Oh, and there's Hannah as well. Hi, Hannah.
Hi, yeah. Okay, yeah, thank you. Shall I just get started? I suppose that's the right thing to do. Yeah, so I was asked to just say, I suppose, a few words about, I suppose, my career, how I got to where I've got to at the moment, and a few sort of examples, I think, that, you know, maybe my experiences, which may be sort of helpful to people looking in and listening in. I think the first thing to say that probably there's three sort of key things I would say that my approach, if you like, and how things have sort of happened. I suppose in some respects my career has been partly by design, and partly by being in the right place at the right time, and partly by luck, I think. And there'll be examples of each, I think, as I go through what I'm going to say. I mean, the first thing I would say is that I spent the first 18 years of my working life outside of the NHS. So I left school at 16, which is probably not the conventional route into that most CFOs would sort of take. I did a variety of jobs outside of that in that 18 years. Started off on a YTS scheme, and probably for most people on the call, they've probably never heard of that. That was a long time ago. And I started on that. I was a filing clerk, and that sort of got me started. I followed that by selling typewriters, to give you a bit of an indication. Again, that shows my age, I think, really. I don't think we have typewriters now. And then I worked for family business for about 10 years. And I think that probably scoped more than anything else my approach to work and my work ethic, I think. When you basically, a very small business, it was my father and my brother and me. And we did everything, you know, say the term, you do everything to make the tea as well. We certainly did that, and made lots of cups of tea as well in that process. But I think that's to say, that shaped really how I thought about things. And also I had my first taste of accountancy. Towards the end of that, the business wasn't doing very well. It's in the early 90s, and we was going through a recession at the time, and a very small business, and we lost it in the end. But during that last couple of years, I realised that actually I was hopeless at running a business, and you know, the reason why is because I didn't really know how they worked, and certainly from an accounting point of view. So I enrolled on the AAT Foundation course, which gave me a bit of an understanding, I suppose, of underneath, and that's really where it all sort of started. Unfortunately, the business went bust after that. I had 2 young children, and I had to earn money, so I just did whatever I needed to do. And even in those roles, I think, and probably all the roles I had prior to coming to NHS, they all gave me something. They all gave me some knowledge, some experience with dealing with different people, and certainly that particular period did as well. I worked in a bakery, a warehouse, and I worked driving lorries as well on the Argos home delivery. It was driving a 7.5-ton lorry, so that was an experience and a half. But that brought a different perspective on life, but it was something I sort of had to do. But after doing that for a couple of years, I had to really make a choice what I wanted to do with my working career, really. I could either go on to try and do whatever I could as far as the driver's concerned. That would be sort of taking a Class 1 license or something like that. Or I could change course. And the only qualification I had was this AAT Foundation course. So I decided that that's what I would start doing. So I self-funded it. I didn't have any experience. I was working in a transport office at the time, nothing to do with accountancy. I did my intermediate and my advanced in AAT, and also did my foundation in ACTA as well. And that was really the point where I got an opportunity to work in a finance department in the NHS. And then luck comes into it. I said there was a sort of lots of different examples, but luck came into it. I went for a job in the NHS, East North Arts Trust. I didn't get it. I didn't get it because I didn't have any finance experience. And then I got a phone call out of the blue, and probably wouldn't happen now, but well, one of the other finance managers needed somebody, and he asked me if I wanted a job, essentially. And of course, I snapped his hand off and said, of course I do. And so I started, and within a couple of weeks, I was working in the NHS. I guess really my work ethic after that, once I got the opportunity, I wanted to make the most of it, and that's what I did. Again, being in the right place at the right time. I think I was working for another finance manager at the time who was a contractor, who wasn't particularly well liked there, and he left within a couple of months and left me essentially sort of holding the baby, I suppose, in terms of that role. But actually, it was the best thing that could have happened to me. I was doing all of the journals, I was writing the reports, I was attending directorate meetings and all of those sort of things, and it really was a really good learning process for me. And then later on, I ended up passing my exams, and that was recognised within the trust I was at. But I started to just look at my CV and started again by design, starting to shape what knowledge I had. I got an opportunity to work in the costing department, just at the start of PBR when that was coming on. And I did that, and bored me to tears, frankly, I have to say. I'm an accountant, but I don't like spreadsheets, by the way. As I say, it bored me to tears. So in the end, I was given an opportunity to come back in as a finance manager, and more the cut and thrust and the business side of what we were doing and operations, and that really suited me much better. But a really crucial opportunity I got was at the time we were looking after a local, well, it wasn't that local, but a hospital, a tertiary hospital, Mount Vernon Cancer Hospital. We'd taken it over from West Herts, and the finances were in a shambles, and they were considering it being a big financial risk. And if anything, the chief exec at the time was trying to find ways in which he could pass it on to a more local trust around that sort of area and that sort of time. And actually, one of the directors, who's quite a crucial name, and I'll mention him again a bit later on, John Webster, his name was, and we sat down, we had an informal conversation about something completely different. And he said, I hear you're being the finance manager of Mount Vernon. And I said, yeah, that's right. And he said, blimey, that's a right car crash. You know that, don't you? That's going to be a real nightmare. And I was still happy to take it on because I was happy to be part of it. And what I managed to do is turn that around. So I turned it around by doing normal financial management, I thought, setting budgets again, putting costs in the right places, looking at funded establishments, all the things that you would do, bread and butter stuff. And actually, when we started to report on Mount Vernon, people could start seeing exactly what the performance was like, rather than this mess that I obviously, and part of that is a little bit of fortune, because I was given the opportunity to be able to do that. I turned it around, and then I was a hero, if you know what I mean. I didn't think I was a hero at the time, but it did my career prospects no harm at all, I should say. But after that, I went back to looking at my CV again. I practiced in financial accounts, and I set back in my PDP. And again, being in the right place at the right time, I was quite fortunate. A job was there, and they said, would you want to go and do it? And I said, yeah. And so nobody else wanted to do it. So I ended up doing that. I became a financial controller shortly after that, and led the accounts, annual accounts process. But it was a very technical area. I quite enjoyed it, I have to say, but it was quite a technical area. And I was ambitious. I wanted to become a director of finance, and therefore it probably wasn't the right place to stay, if you know what I mean. So I wanted to get back into the business operational side again. I had to leave East North Arts Trust to do it, because there was nowhere else for me to go in that particular organisation. And as you could probably hear from what I've just said, I've sort of done just about every job there was there to do. So that was probably good to move on. And I went to a PCT in 2010. I don't know if people remember, 2010 is when they announced they were abolishing PCTs, which was a really sensitive. And I worked there for about 3 years. Again, a great learning curve for me, working as a commissioner. And in fact, I've been in commissioning ever since, actually. But it was a very good experience for me. It wasn't that great all the time. I think there was lots of changes going on, quite a stressful situation. They broke up the commissioning function over 3 different areas, so the council, NHS England, and obviously the new CCP. It was quite a complex and difficult area. I, in the end, as a result of all of that, I ended up in NHS England, and again, another experience there as well. It worked slightly different, I think, to most other organisations, but a great experience and some great people there. So I really sort of enjoyed my time there. But again, there was all sorts of restructures going on whilst I was there. I decided to go on the contracts market, and again, a crucial move really. Although on one hand, it really gave me exposure to a number of different roles, working in Skipton House for part of the time, specialist commissioning I worked in. But probably the key one was working as a chief finance officer or a director of finance. And again, a little bit of fortune, but also a little bit of my work ethic that helped me achieve that. My old boss, Chris Ford, he was watching his son play rugby, and an agency guy he knew, his son also played the same rugby, just asked him if he knew anyone that would be interested in a director of finance role in a very small provider, Hearts Urgent Care it was at the time. And he put my name forward. He knew I was really keen to do it. He always said I could do it. And I must admit, I almost at that stage felt that I probably wouldn't make it to Director of Finance because opportunities weren't really coming my way. And he phoned me, and after a little bit of deliberation, probably for a couple of months, he said, would you be interested in taking it on as an interim, which is what I did. And I was there for a year, and it was a really, it was excellent experience for me. And most people would say, trying to get a job as a chief finance officer is very difficult. Often you can't get a job as a chief finance officer unless you're a chief finance officer, which is all a bit sort of bit balmy really. And I know there's moves to change that, but at the time that was one of the real sticking blocks, not having the experience, but how do you get the experience to do the job? But this gave it to me. I had a year there, and I had the badge then. And after a very short stint at London Specialist Commissioning, one of my ex-colleagues, John Webster, which I mentioned 5 minutes ago, phoned me up out of the blue and asked me if I wanted to work in West Norfolk and Kings Lynn, which was about a 2-hour drive from my house where I was living at the time. And I said, yes, of course I do. Go there oh, sorry, my phone's going. Oh, that's an unship moment. So yes, and he asked me if I wanted to go, and of course I said yes, I do, absolutely. And I worked there, and that was quite a crucial time for me, as probably most people might have gathered. I'm transitioning, and I had decided I was going to transition at that point. But I worked for him. I told him after a couple of months. That was somewhat again, a bit of a mistake on me. I sent a text to a friend of mine, and I sent it to him instead, and let the cat out of the bag that I wanted to transition. But he was amazingly supportive, I have to say, and took me back, I have to say. I would have thought if anyone come to me at the time and said they wanted to do what I wanted to do, it would have been a lot of stress and that, but he was really supportive. I wasn't going to go for the permanent job there at West Norfolk, but he encouraged me to do so. And unfortunately, I didn't get it. I didn't get it. No, a much better guy got it actually, but I didn't get it, and that was we were both gutted because I set my heart on being at West Norfolk. But he said he'd put a word in for me, and within a month or so, Adrian Marr, who's at the time the Director of Finance Eastern Region, suggested that there was an opportunity in Thurrock. So I went and met Mandy Ansell. And she was the accountable officer at the time. We got on famously, and in the end I got the job there. Lots of tales to tell on that one. The first one was when I actually went for the interview. I got to the end of the interview, and she said, oh, by the way, I went as a man, by the way, sorry, I should have mentioned that. I went as a man to the interview, and at the end of the interview she said, is there anything you want to, you told me about your experience and what have you, what about you, tell me a bit about you. So I told her that I'm transitioning, and I'd like to transition at Thurrock. And she was, again, absolutely really supportive, wanted to help me. And that's what I did. And I guess, I don't know how long I've had actually, but I guess that's probably where I'd leave it, because that's where I am now. I'm about to, just to say, going forward, I'm about to embark on another episode in my career in Hearts Partnership Trust, a mental health trust in Hertfordshire, and I'm looking forward to that.
Great. Thank you, Marie, and all the very best in your new role whenever that starts.
Thanks.
So that was really great. Thank you. What we'll do, Marie, if we don't mind, we'll go to Hannah, and then we'll take questions when you've both done your updates. But thank you very much on that. That was really good. Thank you. Okay, Hannah. Thank you.
Hi, Jonathan. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Can you hear me? Okay,
Yeah,
John, good.
you.
Thanks, Maria. Gosh, that's interesting. I'm not sure I can quite live up to your career story, but I'll give it a go. So I only joined the NHS 6 years ago, and I was in private sector before that. So I'll give you a bit of a rundown of my career and how and why I came into the NHS, and then perhaps talk through some of the challenges that I faced as well. So after leaving university, I joined Nestle on the grad scheme in finance, and so that was about 3 years, and did roles in factories, in internal audit, in head office and divisional teams, and did my SEMA qualification at the same time, whilst I ate quite a lot of chocolate from those factory shops there at Nestle. So stayed there for it was about 5 years, and after the grad scheme, I did a sales finance role. But after 5 years, I decided to go travelling. So I went off for a couple of years, and whilst I was in Australia, I worked for Virgin Mobile. I came back to the UK, and then, entirely unrelated to Virgin Mobile, I got a job with Virgin Atlantic. So I was with Virgin Atlantic for 10 years. I did a number of finance roles, which covered predominantly on the commercial side. So I was covering sales and marketing and customer experience. And then towards the end of my time there, for the last couple of years, I moved to be the head of finance at Virgin Atlantic. So in that role, I was responsible for all the management accounting and reporting and business partnering and all the overseas finance teams for the whole airline, reporting into the CFO. So I'd got to a time where I was thinking I'm probably ready to move on to another role, but I wasn't quite sure what it was that I wanted to do. And then I just happened to be reading the Sunday Times one day, and I saw an advertisement in there for the NHS Fast Track Executive Programme. So this was a one-off programme, which was a Jeremy Hunt programme, and it was an initiative to bring people in from outside the NHS, and also to encourage clinicians into executive roles. So so a fast track into doing that. So I've always been fascinated by the NHS ever since I was quite a young child. I don't really know why, but I'm just fascinated by how it all worked and how amazing the NHS is. And so I just had to apply. It was just one of those things. I just kept reading the adverts. I'll apply. Let's see. I'd rather have a go and try than not do it than always wonder. So, but I was really fortunate, and I was successful at getting onto this executive fast track program. So, I left the world of free Virgin flights and joined the NHS. So, this program that I joined on, there was 50 of us on it. There were 14 people from outside the NHS, only 2 finance people, and 36 who were already working inside the NHS, who were all clinical. So there were mainly hospital consultants, a few medical directors, there were GPs, a few nurses, and a few paramedics. So there were 50 of us altogether, and our first month was at Harvard. So I was back to blackboards and classrooms 9 till 5. So it was a pretty intense month in Harvard, being chucked into learning about health systems, international health and policies. Bearing in mind, I knew nothing about health at all at this point, health in the UK nor health internationally. So it was quite an immersion. When I got back from Harvard, I was placed at St George's in London. It was a 9-month programme, the fast track programme, and I was at St George's. It was an interesting situation at St George's, where the chief executive said to me at the time, "Oh, we've done finance for all your career, so why don't you do something different?" So they asked me to lead an outpatient improvement programme. So not only was I completely out of my comfort zone in the NHS and the world of health, but I was also now in improvement, having always worked in finance. So completely out of my comfort zone, but sort of knuckled down into what I thought was probably a bit of common sense on program management, and what I thought needed to happen to improve outpatients. So, and while I was on this 9-month programme, there was quite a lot of development actually, included a week in India, looking at different health institutions in India and how healthcare worked over there. There were a lot of KPMG development workshops, and another week back at Harvard. I also had a praxis group, which was a support group, which is 6 of us, plus a chief executive from the NHS. So at the end of my 9 months programme, I stayed on at St George's to look at service profitability, although I wasn't allowed to use those words because that's a very private sector word, of course, the profitability. But I was looking at their services and what was essentially making money and what wasn't. I then moved on to Royal Surrey County Hospital in Guildford, and I'll talk a bit about the challenges in that in a second. So I moved to Royal Surrey to become Director of Operational Finance. So that, of course, was my first real proper NHS finance role. So it was a pretty steep learning curve, and now I basically led all the trust finance, contracting and procurement. After a couple of years at the Royal Surrey, I decided I wanted a role where I could influence over a wider area. So I moved to be the Regional Finance Director for NHSE for the whole of the South, so the South East and South West. And then nearly 2 years ago, when NHSE and NHSE merged, I became the Regional Finance Director for the South East. So that's what I do at the moment. So that is my rundown. I just sort of think, what challenges have I faced during my career? So thinking through the personal challenges, of course, and not the work challenges. While I was at Virgin, I had 2 children, so I had maternity leave of a year each time, and I think that is always quite concerning. Thinking how do I make sure my career moves forward while I'm taking maternity leave, and I've got little children to look after as well. So that's quite a personal challenge. When I joined the NHS and went to Harvard for a month, my children were 5 and 3 at the time, and I found that some people criticised me for leaving my children for a month. I mean, it was incredibly hard for me to leave my children for a month, but I do have a husband who is capable of looking after them, albeit I had to leave a lot of lists for him of what he had to do every day. However, he was capable of doing that, and they visited me in Boston. But it's really quite interesting that as a female, leaving my children, I faced some criticism for that. And then after about 6 months, the main challenge that I felt, after about 6 months on the NHS Fast Track programme, I realised I had no support for getting a permanent role in the NHS. And the feedback that I was getting was, you'll never get a role, you haven't got any NHS experience. So this was really demoralising. So after leaving a good job at the NHS, leaving a good job at Virgin for the NHS, to then find that I wasn't going to get a role because I hadn't worked in the NHS, which I think is similar to Maria saying you won't get a CFO role because you haven't been a CFO. It just seems ludicrous. And indeed, I applied for a couple of roles that I knew I could do, but I was rejected on paper without even an interview. And I know that was because I'd got no NHS experience. So this was a real blocker. I was then really fortunate, and luck does come into it. I was really fortunate that the role at the Royal Surrey came up, and they were far more forward thinking than most others, I have to say, and we're looking for someone with some different skills and perspectives and experience, and ideally a bit of commercial experience. So I was really fortunate that that came up at that time. I think once you've got your foot in the door and you can demonstrate your achievement, then there are huge numbers of opportunities in the NHS. But I just think we should let a few more people in from outside and support them to move forward and get roles. On the development side, I have mentors. I've had very few. I've never had a sponsor, but I really wish there was someone there for me when I joined the NHS to give me those pointers and help with networks and opening doors. I had a coach for a year or so and some couple of mentoring sessions, but I didn't find anything that I felt was really helping me, so I'm not sure I found the right person. So I'd say that it's really important that when you're starting coaching, mentoring and sponsorship, that you're really clear what you're looking for and why, and that you really regularly take stock as to whether it's working for you. So these days I'm a sponsor and a mentor, and as you can imagine, I'm quite passionate about development and also bringing in people from outside, bringing in talent from outside the NHS. I think that's me. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Hannah. And you're right about that experience point. I think it's overplayed often in lots of jobs. And interestingly, we were talking some other colleagues about the entry level of the NHS at Band 2s, and some of the job descriptions were saying like NHS experience essential for a Band 2. I mean, how are young folks supposed to get into a job? So I think, you know, I think that is overplaying. It's about ability and talent, isn't it, and hard work, isn't it, not just the you've done it before. And that to be a director of finance, you have to be a director of finance is a load of nonsense, isn't it? And that basis will never replace anybody.
Exactly, yeah.
So that's really great. So thank you, Hannah, and thank you, Maria. Maria, you're welcome to put your camera back on now. And I think, Grace, are you looking at if there's any questions for Hannah and Maria?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, we've had a few come in so far, and to everyone attending, please do send more in, as we will now have some Q&A. So there is a question for Maria on Slido, and it is, hi Maria, thank you very much for sharing your experience. Did you receive the same support from senior colleagues whilst and after transitioning?
I did. I mean, I have to say my support was very touching. I think anyone going through this, the first thing you really worry about, I was a contractor, so the first thing you worry about is that you won't get another job, because people will smile at you and say, oh yeah, but you're too much hassle. So I couldn't believe the support I got from both John and Mandy, the two mechanical officers I've worked under. They were absolutely brilliant, and I think probably I didn't feel any issues at all with anyone I came into contact with. The only thing I would say is, of course, every place I went to knew exactly who I was. There wasn't a worry. There wasn't any confusion there. But I got a lot of support. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. And a question for Hannah: how do you balance a demanding career whilst being a parent?
Oh gosh, juggle. So yeah, and actually I worked part-time, I have to say, as well when my children were little. So that's always tricky, isn't it? In a senior role, working part-time, but also with the little children, and my husband works as well. So it is juggling, and I found I had working flexibly as well. So I sort of working in the evening so I could spend time with the children, and then every week was who's dropping off, who's picking up, how's it working. So a lot of juggling and using breakfast clubs and after school clubs, and a bit of nanny at one time as well. But yeah, constant juggling, and also constantly thinking I'm not doing a good enough job either at my paid job or at being a parent or anything. So you constantly think, oh, am I doing enough for everything? But I think you've just got to, it's just doing the best you can, and yeah, trying to juggle and not beat yourself up about not being able to do everything.
Great, thank you. So touching on that actually, and I think it'd be a question for the both of you, do you feel that flexibility has had to play an important part in your career progression? And for this person asking a question, they have young children and also they are part-time, so it's sometimes a personal concern. Do you have any advice for them?
So was that on about how being flexible on roles or working?
I think so. I think it's the sort of flexible working patterns that are hopefully available to those working in the NHS.
Yeah. I think, I think there's been quite a sea change over recent years on flexible working, and I'd really hate to think that there's anybody there now that doesn't think that flexible working is needed, and it's really important. So I think it's just the way we work. You actually see a lot of people's emails saying I work flexibly, and they might be working late at night, but that just works for them. And we can see through this pandemic with everybody working online that I think that's even more able. You're even more able to do that. So I would say, when you've got a young family or caring responsibilities, it's just talk to your manager about what you can do when, and I think it's just a way of working it through together. Don't Maria think what Maria thinks on that?
I was going to say what she said, really. Yeah, so no, actually, most of what you just said was absolutely right. I think what has really helped in terms of flexibility, there's been a number of although it's a dreadful time for everybody at the moment, there's been a number of positives in terms of working patterns and what have you that's come out of this. And one of those I would say is working flexibly. Not only with the fact that we're all working from home, all sitting in our front rooms or whatever on this call at the moment, which is a massive change, and that we've got the ability to be able to do that. I think working flexibly as well. I mean, I know lots of people, particularly now kids, schools are shut, aren't they? It's a nightmare. I don't from that, but I don't have children living at home anymore. But no, as I say, I think it's really proved that it can be done very, very easily. It could always have been done, obviously, but I think we've managed to demonstrate that. And it's something that's massively needed, isn't it? We need all the talent we can get in the NHS, and so absolutely. But so I think what we've been through is really been a great opportunity to demonstrate that it can be done.
Brilliant, thank you. Sorry, Jonathan, did you want to come in then?
I just mind a question for me, if you don't mind, really. It sounds like you had, from what you've said so far, a reasonably positive experience when you were transitioning. I just as part of this program, it's aimed at all aspects of of our workforce. And one of the areas I do wonder whether still in the sort of LGBTQ plus that people don't feel confident about expressing who they are for fear of prejudice or whatever like that. What do you think we need to do more in terms of this program to sort of help those individuals? Because I know some people aren't confident of disclosing that in some of the data we capture, and for all reasons I totally understand, but clearly we want to help and support those individuals. What do you think we need to do then, perhaps, Mia, from your experience?
I mean, I think awareness is really important, not so much for people. I mean, I'm thinking through the trans community, if you like, where I'm part of, but I just think it's awareness of who we are, if you know what I mean, and an understanding of who we are. And although I've had a really positive experience in terms of workforce, there is things that people don't understand. So what do you call me? Do you call me he or she, for example? Now, I think it's fairly obvious, you see. So when you come to work dressed in women's clothes and all the rest of it, makeup on it, it's pretty obvious that I'm a she. But actually people struggle with that. And I don't think they mean to be nasty. But there's been a push by NHS England to promote pronouns, for example, and proper use of pronouns. That type of thing is really helpful. So I was able to put on my sort of email, she and her, if you know what I mean. If there's anyone any doubt, they know what to say. But I do think probably awareness, and it's not just, I mean, obviously that's coming from a trans perspective, but if you think about the LGBT community as a whole, I think it is that awareness. And there is still examples that I've heard about where people haven't been particularly sensitive to LGBT, even making reference to young guys that don't need to progress their career because they're not going to have children, are they? That type of comment that's been said within the NHS, which is not great. So I think that awareness, that's something I think could be done, and then a safe place for people to be able to express themselves. So in terms of LGBT, a safe place for them to be able to express themselves, but awareness for all the non-LGBT people as well, so they can understand where who people are.
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, I won't mind perhaps catching offline sometime with you about how we might just think about that a bit more as part of the sponsorship program. So I think, we've been talking a lot about BAME, and we haven't talked so much about disability either, but I'm conscious that we need to make sure we've got, opportunities for those groups that feel underrepresented or nervous about being who they are and that sort of thing. So
I was going to say,
if we could set something up as a catch-up, it'd be very helpful.
I'd love to. That'd be great. I was just going to say there's actually synergies between the two. So we had under the Black Lives Matter, we had in our CCG, we had a conversation about that in the BAME community, and that did a lot for me, for my awareness of that community. So I think there's a lot of synergies. But yes, more than happy to discuss.
I mean, what I've found is the more you talk about things, the more people who, like you say, don't mean to do the wrong thing, just feel uncomfortable about talking about stuff, don't they? I think the more you talk about it, it's amazing how you sort of start to think of solutions and help and approaches because you don't feel embarrassed about what to say. So that's an important part of all of this, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Sorry, Grace.
No, that's great. Thank you. And a really important aspect that we need to pick up as part of the programme. So thanks for that. Hannah, there's been another question come through around moving from the private sector into the NHS and how you overcame maybe any challenges when you moved into an environment where your colleagues would have more experience as working in the NHS. And did you come across any challenges and how you overcame that?
Oh gosh, loads of challenges. Well, acronyms to start with. I didn't know what anything meant, and I went to Harvard, and I was there in lectures, and I had to keep leaning over and whisper to somebody, "What does that mean? What does that mean?" So my initial colleagues, mainly clinicians, were a great help in early days. But then I really just had to. I was just asking a lot of questions, because you're right, everybody knows more than you, but then I think you can start to, but I think what people found as benefit from me is that I'd go, "Oh, there's another way of doing that. Have you thought about this?" Or, you know, it's that old chestnut. You're coming with fresh eyes. You're looking at a different, you know, looking at something new without that experience and without the, "Oh, this is the way it's always been done around here," because you don't know why you don't know how it's done. So you ask some of those questions, and I remember in some meetings asking questions and people going, "Well, we just have to do that." And I was like, "But why? That doesn't make any sense." So there was a lot of just saying to people, "Look, do you mind? Can you just explain things to me?" But then a lot of actually challenging or being able to say, you know, "Is this the way we need to do it, or are there different ways of doing it?" Of course, there's a lot of having to get people. You know, that you've got to get people on board with you as well. With you, you've got to. Unfortunately, you have to prove yourself, because people aren't. You know, they think, "Oh, she's new, she doesn't know anything, she doesn't know anybody." So it does take quite a lot of time to be able to get people on board. So it's quite, you know, I think you do need to sort of make a few impacts quite quickly. But yeah, I think those are the main things. It's just being really open and honest and not pretend. I've never pretended to know anything that I haven't. It's just saying, "Sorry, I just don't understand what that means. Can you just run that by me?" And of course, just trying to go and speak to as many people as possible as well, to learn as quickly, really, to get up to speed. And I'm still learning now, of course. I've only been here 6 years, and there's loads I still don't know. So I'll keep on doing what I'm doing, asking those questions.
Brilliant, thanks, Hannah. We've had a few more questions actually going back to the sort of flexible part-time working topic, and I'll try and bring some of these together. So there's one for the advice from you guys really around this sort of flexible part-time working, and how would you approach this when you're applying for a new job? When would you as an employer expect an applicant to raise this with you? Jonathan, maybe do you want to come in for that one?
I mean, I would say at the outset, I mean, we've sort of introduced this concept of in the Northwest now of the why not, rather than sort of, you know, having to turn it around the other way. And I think we do need to be flexible, because, you know, otherwise we're sort of excluding talent that will be really valuable towards our organisations and the work that we do. I think the thing is to be upfront about these things, isn't it? And I think the more you're upfront, it doesn't become a difficult conversation after the event. So I think you just be upfront about, you know, what your flexible needs are, and hopefully, you know, your prospective employer or your current one will work flexibly to support you. And I think, as others have said, what's out of all this sort of the dark stuff of COVID, what this technology has shown is people can work at home far more than we thought. I remember we were even talking about working at home before COVID kicked off, and it was a bit like a naughty word about how could anyone possibly work at home, or how could we possibly let anyone work at home, and would they be just watching the television and, you know, sat in the garden sort of thing. And I think what we've found is absolutely everyone can. Clearly people still need to, for a well-being, the face-to-face contact, but, you know, this technology has allowed people to do, and I think people have worked just as hard, if not even harder, actually, when we've been working in this Teams environment. So for me, I'd say be upfront about it and discuss that at the outset. And I think mindsets have changed quite a bit over this period about how people can work and how you can be flexible. But that's my opinion anyway. I don't know what Hannah and Maria think.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's better to discuss it up front, but I think it's better to find out the requirements of the job and to the extent to which it could be done part-time, because of course part-time can range from a few hours a week to 4.5 days, and so I think it's really key to understand the job and whether that's going to fit with you before you raise it, because you know, working 4 days or even full-time but spread over 4 days, I think there's very few jobs that couldn't be done like that, but there are some others that would be more difficult if it was only sort of a day and a half. But then even having said that, if you're looking to work only 1, 2, 2.5, 3 days, there's always job share potentials as well. So there are other ways out there, but I think we're at the, in some places, I think we're in the foothills of some of that, of being able to really make job sharing work well. As Jonathan says, working from home was a bit of a ooh, and I think job sharing is in that same category. So I think we've got a way to go at job sharing, but I do think if you're at the 4.5 days, then that should be something that's easily should be discussed, and I would hope that sort of working pattern could be accommodated.
Brilliant. If we've got time just for one more question, we've had one on Zoom from Marie Miller, and it's around, do you believe you have to be willing to travel to succeed? As she's found this as a significant blocker in career progression due to having family responsibilities. Maria and Hannah, if you want to come in.
Yeah, I mean, I think it probably gives you more opportunity if you can travel. I mean, in my case, I've never really travelled that far. I didn't like to stay away from home, but that was my personal choice. But when I did the West Norfolk job that I spoke about, I had a 2-hour journey to get there, which was a bit of a challenge, to say the least. But I preferred to travel rather than stay over, if you know what I mean. I think so. Some of it's about a personal choice, but I think if you only limit yourself to an hour's commuting or hour and a half commuting, then you are potentially cutting off opportunities that could be further away. In my case, I was a little bit fortunate with the number of things that I've said in my presentation, in as much as that the opportunities that came up, they were all just about commutable, and so I took those opportunities. But as you should say, if you open up the whole country, of course the opportunities will become more. So it's a bit down to personal choice, isn't it? So in a way, distance will limit you if you've got other commitments, and certainly if you've got families and stuff. And I never had that, but if you've got families and everything, then unfortunately it probably will limit you, simply because in your geographical area there would just be by default less opportunities.
Yeah, pretty much the same. If you're talking regular commute, you'll limit your sphere of how far you can travel. But I think there will be some roles. So when I first started in my regional role, I was covering the whole of the south. I was forever on trains. I think I knew every network and every carriage. So I was forever travelling. But most of the time I tried to do it in a day, so I wasn't staying overnight that often. But there was a fair bit of travelling around. But that was done as sort of might be an ad hoc every couple of weeks. So it really depends whether it's a regular travel every day that the concern is, or the ad hoc travel. But I think it's your own situation, and then looking at what the opportunity is as to how you think that will progress or help your career.
Yeah, I'd agree with Hannah and Maria. I mean, sometimes it depends on your geography as well. So if you think about the Northwest, it's quite a condensed area, so you probably is more opportunity and not so much distance to travel than if you perhaps in the South, where organisations are much further geographically spread apart. So it is about ultimately personal choice, isn't it, and location and that sort of thing.
I'll just say one other comment. I was just going to say, the one thing probably we've been talking about today is about flexible working, and it's probably more now, probably in the last 12 months, that an opportunity to take a job in Scotland, for example, not so that's a bit extreme. I say that, I mean, it might not be for you guys actually. For me, I live in Chelmsford in Essex, so for me it would be extreme, but an opportunity to take a job like that may actually be possible now, when it wasn't perhaps or not seen to be possible in the past. So maybe more opportunity now because of how we've been working. Yeah,
you're right, Marie, because you could potentially have a job that some of it's at home via this sort of technology and some of it is in the office, so there's less travelling, and depends on the role and the job. But yeah, I think this technology has introduced that flexibility that, you know, you could be anywhere in the country for some jobs, couldn't you, and still fulfill your job.
Yeah.
Thanks all.
Is that the last one, Grace?
Yeah, I think so. And then just looking at time, we should have had a comfort break. Sorry, I did ask a couple of last questions there. So, Jonathan, should we break just for a couple of minutes?
Probably
so that
give people a chance for a 5-minute comfort break. But before everyone dashes off, I'm going to say a big thank you to Hannah and Maria. If we had a virtual round of applause button, I would press it right now. But thank you very much. It was really good of you to come and speak to everybody. So
thank you.
No problem.
Pleasure.
Great, thank you.
So we're back in 5 minutes, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks all.
Hopefully you'll all be able to see that now.
Yeah, I can see that. Thank
Okay,
you.
perfect. Great. So so as mentioned, I work in our diversity and inclusiveness team in the UKI section of EY. So my role is to support our D&I strategy across the firm and help our service line. So all of the different strands of our business work to be inclusive and to drive change and appreciate all of the differences that make us who we are. So that's my role. And Career Watch sits within our D&I strategy. I thought I'd just touch a little bit on this because it's so integral to the programme. So our goal is to radically accelerate our progress on D&I and create a culture where everyone belongs. And we're a partnership firm. So that's the most senior role that we have. So we need to shift the makeup of our partnership by 2025. And we do that with these 3 different pillars. So the first one is belong at EY. So everyone, essentially the best way to explain this is, just bring your whole self to work. And I think through COVID, and you've probably seen it in your teams as well, we are seeing so much more of who we are as people. We're seeing literally into people's homes. We're seeing people's children. We're seeing, celebrations that people are having, a whole range of different things. And it's important that that we embrace belonging, and that you're able to bring as much as you want into work. So that's the foundation really of our D&I strategy. And then we have our differential focus on race and gender. So we want to shift our makeup of our partnership, basically doubling it for our female and Black and minority ethnic partnership by 2025, and shift our makeup of the people that lead our firm. So our Career Watch program sits within these 2 pillars really, because we're slightly differently structured. So our sponsorship program, I know for you, anyone that would like to have a sponsor is able to. For us, we took an approach that we know that sponsorship actually works really well for our white male population, based on the makeup of the most senior people at our firm, and therefore we wanted to focus on our women and our minority ethnic groups to ensure that they are able to access something that is so significant to your career, having somebody that can advocate for you and talk about how great you are at your job, and open doors to new opportunities for you. So we're slightly differently structured, and our program sits within these 2 pillars. And then the final pillar of our strategy is be a leading disruptive voice on D&I. So this is both internally and externally. I think what we've seen especially last year with the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement, people struggle sometimes to talk about diversity, to talk about inclusion. So it's important that both internally and externally we're supporting that conversation and equipping people with the right information, and that's part of our program as well. So what is Career Watch? So that's what we call our sponsorship program. The team that make this up is diversity and inclusiveness, our learning and development team, and HR. So it's really that three-pronged approach. We also have a 2-year sponsorship program for women and ethnic minority people, and because of the focus that we're doing with our women and our ethnic minorities, we focus it at those areas that we know when we're looking at our overall headcount we don't see as much progression. So that is for our managers within the business, and then for CBS, which is our services, so that's where I work, that's HR, that's finance, it's targeted at level 2 ethnic minorities. And the objectives of our program are to retain diverse talent. I know that that is a problem across the market, and especially into leadership, and to remove and avoid roadblocks for people's careers. And I think I just dialed on just before and I was hearing a few of those potential roadblocks that may, actually have been, removed as part of this new kind of flexible working structure that we have. So I think I was hearing a few things about, do you have to be in certain areas to succeed and things like that. Well, hopefully, from the last year, we've seen that doesn't need to be the case. It's to develop both a watcher and watchee. So these are what we call our sponsees and our sponsors, just to complicate matters. But we are looking at changing this for this year, and to provoke organisational change and learning. And that's, I suppose, the diversity element of this. So what is sponsorship? So I'm sure you've had quite a bit on this. There's a couple of quotes here that I think really explain it in the best way. So this is from the Harvard Business Review. Active support by someone appropriately placed in the organisation who has significant influence on decision-making processes and who is advocating for, protecting and fighting for the career advancement of an individual. So your sponsor is really the person that can talk about you when you're not in the room and where decisions are being made. So yeah, I thought this really encompassed that really well, and they have to be someone that can that is right, appropriately placed, that can say, oh, I know who your manager is, I know who can support you to get where you want to be in your career. And this is from Catalyst, so focused on advancement, predicated on power, so high stakes for the sponsor, the protege, as they call the sponsee here, an organisation. And it requires trust, honesty, communication and commitment. And that for us is something we really push with our watchers and watchees. If you don't have these 4 elements, the relationship isn't going to work, and this leads directly into that belonging piece that I spoke to you about earlier. Belonging is all about psychological safety and trust at work. We spend the most time at work, so you need to have that trust with the people that you work with. So so this is something that we really drill home with our watchers and watchees. So we have there's different kinds of relationships that you can have, and I think there's sometimes a little bit of confusion between sponsorship and mentoring, and then you also might have coach as well. It depends on you and whether these are also relationships that you have in work or outside of work, or a bit of both. So this is just to be really clear on the different types of relationship. So sponsorship is expending one's political capital on behalf of a group or individual. So it's using that power, that influence that you have to support somebody else's career. Whereas mentoring is a long-term relationship to enable future success, but focuses on different success factors. So these relationships work really well, and it's important, some people might have mentors. I think mentoring was really pushed over the last sort of 5 years. People talked about mentoring a lot, but sponsorship is is equally as important. And then you have coaching, so it's more short-term, performance focused. And then, you know, feedback, we all should know what feedback is, but it's the conversation about, you know, how to succeed. And you will have feedback in all of these different relationships. So, you know, if you're getting a sponsor as part of this program and you don't have a mentor, you might want to look at that. I have both a sponsor and a mentor, and I have an informal mentoring as well, just somebody that doesn't work at EY that I talk to about my career and talk about progression, and I find it really helpful to have that. So there's no kind of limit on these relationships, and they're all really important. So sponsorship is usually targeted at those just below leadership. So we address our pipeline down to senior associate, so I won't go into detail about that, but that's to do with our levels. So this is kind of the commitment that we want people to be making. So we want the watcher to seek feedback from others to build knowledge and trust. You know, talking to managers, talking to people that have worked with you to really understand, you know, what's your personal brand, what do people think about you, so that they can properly influence. We want them to discuss the sponsee's career trajectory and the obstacles with them. So this is really key to the relationship. One of the first kind of tips that we give everybody on our program is to have just a conversation about you, you know, not just about work, not just about you know, this relationship, you know, get to know each other, because not everybody's obstacles are the same. And I think as well with COVID, we're seeing the different challenges that people are facing due to their circumstances. So being able to start that relationship by just getting to know each other is really important. You know, what has been your sponsor's career trajectory? What obstacles have they had? You know, are they similar to yours? And being able to communicate those barriers. And also it brings in this element of privilege as well, that we obviously focus our program on those two different groups, so our women and our ethnic minority population. There are different barriers that women and ethnic minorities and also female ethnic minorities face in businesses, in organizations. So being able to be really open and honest about the barriers that you faced in your career helps the relationship so much. So that is something that we really encourage. And we also want the watcher to use their influence to obtain project work and different types of experiences for the watchee that they may not have had before. And then, you know, the commitment on the watchee side is to continue to deliver to a very high standard, reflect on how to add value for themselves and their watcher, and be open to those new experiences and opportunities, and be honest about feedback and the challenges that you're facing. I think that can be really difficult to kind of communicate, especially when your sponsor is in a senior position. You feel like, oh, I don't want to be too vulnerable here and say, you know, all of the development areas that I have, but actually that's exactly what they're there to support. So as much as you can be honest and feedback, it's going to be a great relationship. And obviously both will invest in building that strong relationship, so whether that's time and you know, energy to the relationship. So the key to making it work is the sponsor is in a position to influence. They trust each other. You meet regularly. I can't stress this enough. I think it can sometimes go down the pegging order. It's definitely something we've seen with our sponsorship program that we've had to review a number of times. You know, you making a commitment to each other on this. So whatever that schedule is, I don't know what it is that you recommend. We say once every couple of months, but that's because of our kind of appraisal cycle, if you like. But whatever works for you, you need to be meeting regularly. And depending on the relationship and who it is that is your sponsor and how close they are to your day-to-day role, you know, they can sometimes merge, and then it becomes a meeting that's about your your sponsorship relationship, but also about the business as usual work. Try not to let that happen. Have very separate meetings about, you know, your strengths, your aspirations, your areas of development. And, you know, as a sponsee, you want to be, you know, as usual, performing to a high standard, so that the sponsor feels that they can advocate for you without any risk to their reputation, and that you're accepting of all of the opportunities that the sponsor can bring. So and as you can see, we've had a few slides on the roles and the expectations, and that is because we do 2 feedback cycles of the programme, so one after the first year and one after the end of the programme. And this all, you know, every time that we do these feedback cycles, we are seeing that people are like, oh, you know, my watcher was great at the beginning, but then we didn't have as many meetings, or I struggled to put meetings in their diary. All of these little things add up to the relationship not working as well. So we want to reiterate as much as possible what the expectations of this relationship are and what's going to give you the most value. So the watcher is, you know, leveraging that personal organizational authority. It's giving the watcher exposure, intervening and influencing, and asking what. So this retention piece, it depends on your challenges and what you're facing. For us, and in the market, retention of especially diverse candidates is really difficult, diverse employees, sorry. So it's important that we understand, you know, if there are any challenges that make them, you know, not want to stay at EY. I think that's a market issue. So I think being honest about that is really important. Expanding the sponsee's perception of what they can do as well. I think depending on the barriers that people have had in their career, you know, you can get really worn down on if you've been trying to get on certain projects, or you've been trying to work on certain things and it's not working. So and then it makes you feel like you can't do it, but that's actually not the case. You've just got these barriers that are making it harder for you. So the sponsor's role is to really support that perception of what you can do, and to you know, pump you up basically, and say, no, you can do this. This is how you're gonna do that, and here's the right person to speak to on that. And therefore building that belief in the watchee, and provides feedback to the business. So whatever your kind of structure is, it's great if you can get the sponsor to be giving feedback to support the career journey of their sponsee. And then from the watchee side or the sponsee side, it's important that open and honest at discussing career aspirations, performance and development, and perception of career obstacles as well. I think this is a really critical thing. I think once you start talking about, you know, I think that this might be the issue that I'm having, if that sponsor's then having conversations with people, and then they're realizing that isn't what's causing the obstacle, they can report that back. So if you're communicating the perceptions and what you think might be the issue, it can really help the conversation. You're taking the initiative, you're performing to a high standard, you're seeking feedback, all of the same things that you would normally do, and you're willing to consider and explore those new opportunities, and listening and reflecting. All of this builds the trust that you need. And coaching skills are required throughout this process, and the sponsor may need upskilling in certain areas. So for us, when we have this program that is about supporting our women and our ethnic minorities, because of the seniority of our watchers, there are less women and ethnic minorities to sponsor. So therefore, it's likely that you will be put with somebody who is male or from our white population. So therefore, they might not feel as comfortable when talking about barriers that you feel are because of race. So you know, there may need to be some upskilling and some support given essentially to make sure. But you can also, as a sponsor, you know, if your sponsee is telling you, I've had these challenges because I'm a woman and I've had children, or whatever it may be, you know, there is a responsibility on you, I think, to educate yourself, to support your being the best sponsor that you possibly can, and support those barriers that your sponsee is facing, and then feeding that back to whoever needs to know about any kind of potential organizational change. You know, if you're seeing themes, if you're talking to other sponsors and they're saying, oh yeah, you know, my sponsor was feeling this because, you know, they went to have children, or they don't have any representation that looks like them, whatever it may be, that is all feedback that is so valuable, essentially, to understand. So yeah, we do some training on race and gender, and to upskill our watchers and to support our watchees as well. We have counsellors at EY. This might not be relevant. It's somebody that's purely focused on your professional development. So we brief them that people are on the programme, and that you may be having conversations with the watcher. They're responsible for the more formal processes, and they make decisions about promotions and ratings and all of that kind of stuff. But they provide really useful understanding of the sponsee. So if there's any kind of structure like that, those are great people to speak to understand what's going on. And asking your sponsee if they've got any any mentors, or they have any mentorship relationships, or if they're a mentor themselves as well, you know, that's obviously a great skill to have, and that can be used as the development side rather than just your day-to-day working side as well, to influence. So this is the structure of our 2 years. So the first year is very a lot of centralized support. So we have a launch, we have our sponsorship webinar for watchees, and a sponsorship podcast for watchers. So there's a series of podcasts for them to listen to. We have cultural intelligence sessions. Culture is something that, again, as sponsors, you can upskill yourself on. We all have different cultural backgrounds, different cultural context. Again, it helps to understand that a little bit, and not just from sort of cultural as in, you know, being from different countries, or being from different backgrounds, also your personal style and how that's influenced. So understanding a little bit about that is really valuable. Then we have our race and gender dialogue sessions, and then we end the year with career capital sessions, so to support the building of career plans and things like that. And then our second year is lighter touch, but continue, and that means lighter touch from us as a central team, but the relationship continues in that second year. So it's the first year is really to build that sponsorship relationship, give you any upskilling that you need, and then in the second year it's about you continuing that relationship and interesting things that you might want to read about from a centralized perspective. So some recommendations. So we recommend to meet every 2 months, but it might be more regular for some people. That's a conversation that you should be having right at the start. And then what I mentioned earlier about understanding each other's lived experience is so crucial to building any kind of relationship. You know, asking, you know, how did your sponsor, you know, get to where they are? What barriers did they have? You know, have they seen any potential barriers to people's careers? You know, what do they think of that? All of these kind of conversations are really useful. Talking about work-life balance and what's realistic for you, and you know, and what I mentioned earlier about any barriers that you have felt have you know, stepped in the way of your career is important to kind of discuss at the beginning. So that first meeting for me, really, I think, as somebody told a great story, that their sponsor was like, let's just get out of the office. Obviously I appreciate we can't do that right now, but they went and had a walk and got an ice cream and just chatted about things, really, and she said that really formed. She said, I went in, you know, with all my notes and I was really prepared for this first meeting, but actually it was great to just get to know her sponsor on a human level before they kind of launched into the more formal part of the process. We send a guide early in the process to support the conversations. I think you have something similar as well. We ask the watchee to work on a career plan, and the watcher can support with that. So it's really clear kind of the direction that you're going in and what areas. Then that's, I suppose, that helps with the expectations. The sponsor can say, oh, you know, I actually can't help with this element, but this person can, or yeah, this bit I can definitely help with, and this is how we're going to do it. So we ask the watchees to do that quite early. Having conversations about diary management. For us, we have a lot of, you know, you're doing this off the side of your desk, and we appreciate that you're doing this off the side of your desk. So having those regular meetings and discussing, you know, who's going to move them and, you know, who's going to put them in, all of that kind of conversation is important to have. And there's a great TED talk as well by Carla Harris, How to Find the Person Who Can Help You Get Ahead of Work. We recommend to watch that TED talk to understand a little bit more about sponsorships. That's just a bit of a quick win as at the beginning of your relationship. Okay, so I'll stop there. I think I'm okay for time. Does anyone have any questions that they want to ask at this stage? I'll just stop, just see if there's anything in there. Yeah, we can share the TED Talk link. Yeah, that's no problem.
Can you hear me okay, Amy?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah, managed
Sorry,
to
it's about the doorbell. It's the trials of working at home and nobody else.
Oh, yes. Yeah, no problem.
My daughter ordering from ASOS.
We've had a few questions come through on the chat and on Slido, so I'll get some of those asked now. So
okay, great.
There was actually a couple of questions around how EY decided the targets that you wanted to come out of the programme. So the targets around improving the representation of BAME and women, and how were they derived? Were they based on population, or how were they formed?
So the D&I targets, those were, it's quite a question. So the D&I strategy is separate to the Career Watch programme. So those targets aren't to do with directly that, you know, Career Watch is going to lead to the 20% increase or whatever. That is to do with our whole firm. So there was lots of calculations that went into, realistically, what do we need to do to have more equity, to have more opportunity and representation. So, and then they obviously forecast it across those 5 years. So yeah, so it's not directly linked to the sponsorship program, but it's our firm strategy to increase. And then we added it to increase we added an additional that 15% of the 20% to be our Black partners, based on our anti-racism statement that we released last summer in the aftermath of the BLM protests. We felt that we needed to go a step further and really make that clear.
Brilliant, thank you. And we've had a question from one of our sponsees, Natasha, and she's asked, where the sponsor or the watcher seeks feedback from others to build knowledge of sponsees, would this happen before becoming a sponsor? Would this happen before becoming sponsor and sponsee, or once the relationship is established? And also, would the feedback come from their line managers or the sponsee colleagues, etc.?
Yeah, so it would happen, I'd say, after that first conversation where you're kind of establishing the relationship. I would say it would come in at that stage. So, you know, as a sponsor, I'd be saying, right, who do you think I should speak to get a picture of you and to understand, you know, your skill set and things. You know, obviously you don't have to necessarily agree to that. You could just do it as a sponsor relationship. But yeah, we find that sponsors get a lot out of having those conversations with line managers, people they've worked on projects with, to paint a picture and because your perception of your areas of development might be completely different to kind of your brand perception. So that can give really useful insights. So I'd say after that first initial conversation where you've got to know each other, so that the sponsor has a bit of direction of where you think that your strengths and your areas of development lie, and then you can use that then for those conversations with other people like your line managers, etc.
Excellent, thank you. And there's been a sort of challenge, I guess, to us to say that there's quite a world of difference between the EY approach and the NHS approach. And I guess it's probably a bit of a challenge on us, because I think we've actually got quite a lot to learn from what you guys do in terms of the sort of training and development that you give to both sponsors and sponsees during the journey. How would you suggest to narrow the gap? That's quite a big question, but if you've got any advice, that would be fab.
Yeah, I think in general, I think the way that D&I is talked about is as if it's a separate thing to everything else, but actually diversity just means people. It's just us as individuals. Being able to share your experiences and your barriers in a really open and honest way can be really difficult for people, especially if they're coming any kind of minority. It can be really challenging. But I think that having a sponsor that is open and asking those kinds of questions, like, do you feel that there's been any barriers to you as a woman? Do you feel there's been any barriers to you as because of your faith or because of your, sexuality, if somebody is out, or whatever it may be? Because it allows them to understand. It's a bit of like, we have like something called reverse mentoring. It's a bit like that, to understand a different perspective, because we have to acknowledge that there is a privilege element to careers, that society, like businesses and organizations, weren't designed with a diverse element. So I think the onus is on you, I suppose, as a central team. And I know we've had conversations, Grace, about the different elements of training, but I also think it's on all of us as individuals to kind of step back and think, okay, well, my perception of this it might be completely different to somebody else's, and how can I educate myself? What kinds of questions can I ask to understand it? But also appreciating that it can be quite triggering to people to discuss, returning from maternity leave. That was something that a lot of our watchees were talking about, saying, how they'd felt when returning back to maternity leave. So these are all things that I think you can open up, and it doesn't have to be this big complicated structure necessarily. I think we are all human beings, and understanding a little bit about the perception and COVID as well, the impact of COVID, the impact of working from home. Are you alone at home? Have you got, children that you're homeschooling? All of these elements are part of people's careers. So I think it's a great question, and I think there's a lot out there to kind of help you as well. It doesn't have to be everything designed by a central team. There's a lot out there to support your those conversations, and I'll send some links as well that I think will be valuable for you.
Thanks, Amy. I'm just conscious of time, Jonathan. Is there anything that you wanted to ask, or
no, I mean, in some respects there's differences, and in some respects there's similarities, isn't there? And ours has sort of developed as it's gone along. I think there is that. I know some of the sponsees talked about whether we need some form of training for sponsors. I think it depends, personality plays into some of this, doesn't it, about how some people are sort of feel more comfortable at doing this sort of thing than others. But that's one we need to think about. And I agree that bit about you've got to keep momentum, otherwise there's a danger these things can wither on the vine sort of thing, isn't it? So having some objectives and some deliverables is important in the relationship for both sides, isn't it? So yeah, there's lots of learning we can take from that and build on from what we're doing at the moment. And I think from what we had at the start, from what we have now, Grace, and then we have built on that quite a bit, and we're learning from others. So that was really helpful, Amy. So thank you for that.
No problem. Well, I'll send some things through, and if there's any questions that anybody thinks, it'd be good to ask that, you can email me, or you can get me on LinkedIn or whatever, and I'll come back to you and support. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you.
No problem. And I wish everyone the best of luck with their relationships.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Amy.
So I think we're at the end of the agenda now, aren't we, Grace? So just like to say a big thank you to you, Grace and Megan, for all your hard work in organising this. I think it's been a great session. Hopefully all our participants agree. Thank you to all of our speakers and our interviewees. I think they were really great, and hopefully that's really encouraging a lot of you to go away and think about you know, joining the scheme and becoming a sponsee or even a sponsor, depending on where you're at, or both. So thank you everybody. Hope it's been helpful, and look after yourselves and stay safe in these current times. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jonathan, as well, for all your support.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.